Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became a Deadpool-style hero without a license. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Pain is temporary. Pain is temporary. He repeats these thoughts in his head like a mantra, reminding himself that the pain, no matter how great, will fade and die away as his body mends itself. A missing limb only hurts for a few minutes, 5 at the least and 10 at the most. If he narrows that down to 10-second chunks, and whittles those down until he reaches those marks, 5 minutes really doesn't seem as far away. Just another 10, and another 10 after that. The gaunt, golden-haired man begins before seeming to swallow heavily. With a quirk like that, becoming a hero could put you in a dangerous frame of mind. You'd be sacrificing yourself constantly and subjecting yourself to horrendous pain, and that's no way for a child to grow up. So no, I don't think you can become a hero with a quirk like that. I'm sorry. Izuku feels his heart drop into his stomach, splashing acid over his innards and melting them away. His stomach fills with lead, his world dropping away under his feet just to rush up and break his knees, but that's nothing new. Izuku's used to his dreams being shattered, his hopes being ripped away from his fingers. But this is the last straw. He takes a moment to steady his breath, swallowing back the taste of bile and crushing the burning sensation of tears behind his eyes. As the man All Might begins heading for the stairwell, Izuku raises his head and sets his brow in a defiant line. "I'll prove you wrong," he says with a fire in his voice that floods through his entire being, filling him with new determination. All Might glances back over his shoulder with one brow raised. "Pardon me? I'll not breathe a word of your secret to anyone, but," Izuku tightens his grip of the straps of his backpack, "I'll become the best DMN hero out there, whether or not anyone believes in me." Chilly metal cuffs encircle Izuku's wrists, not tight enough to bite into the skin, but certainly tight enough to prevent escape. Well, the easiest form of escape, anyways. There are always other methods of slipping out of custody. That's one thing Izuku's learned in these past 9 months. Leaning back into the seat and tipping his head back over the seat with a loud sigh, Izuku asks, "So how long do you guys think it'll take?" The officer at his left in the police car swivels his head around to look at Izuku. His eyes are guarded, but completely focused on Izuku's masked face. That's good. He doesn't seem to notice the way Izuku fiddles with his gloves. "Excuse me?" Izuku sits back upright, making sure he's causing enough movement with his upper body to prevent the officer's eyes from wandering down, to where Izuku slips an unfolded paper clip out of the space between his wrist bracer and his glove. Smiling despite the fact the officer can't see it, he shrugs his shoulders and responds, "How long do you guys think it'll be before I inevitably escape once again?" At the officer's hard stare, Izuku barks out a laugh. "I mean, you guys know as well as I do that there's not much I can't escape from. And I'm not even being pretentious here. I'm just stating facts. To be quite honest, the probability of me escaping this vehicle today is hovering at about the 95% mark." The officer blinks his blue eyes, slight surprise flaring in his gaze. "Have you worked out the details that quickly?" From the passenger seat in front of Izuku, a senior officer mutters, "Don't humor him." "Nah, I just like using bullshit percentages. But to be quite honest, I would assume, with a click quiet enough to be lost in the white noise of the engine, the cuffs slide open, that I'm about 99% complete with my escape attempt. If it can even be called an attempt. You know, seeing as it's dead certain to succeed." The movement of the cuffs beginning to drop draws the young officer's eyes off to the side, just as Izuku presumed it would. In the split second between the cuffs falling from his hands and the clank of them hitting the floor, Izuku moves. His left hand darts out, grabbing the officer by the face and slamming his head back into the car door. A second impact with the door knocks the officer unconscious, and as confusion erupts in the driver and passenger seats, Izuku yanks his pair of fiberglass rods from the unconscious officer's belt. He jabs the pronged end of one rod into the officer in the passenger seat, pressing a button on the body of the rod and delivering an electric shock. This sends him slumping forward against the dashboard as the driver struggles to reach for the gun at his belt. Before he can do that, however, Izuku yanks the lock on the door open and rolls free of the vehicle. Various points on his body spark with pain and there's a loud crack as he skids across the pavement, but he pays it no mind. Instead, he rolls with the impact, gathers both rods in his left hand, and is up on his feet in an instant. Civilians pass by in a blur as Izuku runs, his feet hardly touching the ground and his breath coming in short puffs. He doesn't know how long he runs for, but he eventually slows to a jog, then a walk, and leans up against the brick and concrete wall of some old building. With a forceful cough, Izuku takes stock of everything as he slips the fiberglass rods into the sheath at his back. Ah! I broke my arm. He notes, squinting at the awkward angle of his right forearm. He reaches over with his left hand to straighten it, vaguely acknowledging the 3 friction burns stretching along his ribs and right thigh, but he starts with a jump as his phone vibrates in his pocket. Exhaling sharply, he reaches instead for his phone, pulling the bottom of his mask up enough for his mouth to be exposed. Hello? Izuku? Where are you? Dinner's almost ready. Izuku stiffens at the sound of his mother's voice. He pulls his phone away from his face long enough to glance at the time. He's definitely been out longer than he intended, before forcing himself to keep his voice steady. Oh, sorry Mom. I just went for a run and lost track of the time, he says with a sheepish laugh. There's an exasperated sigh from the other end of the line, followed by a mock-scolding voice, you and your fitness craze. You probably could have passed UA's entrance exam and gotten into the hero course with your physical strength alone, you know. Izuku laughs softly, but it's cut short by a hiss of pain as his broken arm snaps back into place with a muffled crack. Of course, Inko picks up on this and immediately asks, Izuku? Are you okay? Why, yeah, I tripped a little bit. He's aware it's a lame excuse, but his time as a vigilante has certainly improved his ability to lie with ease. Somewhat. Inko makes a dissatisfied little noise, but doesn't press the issue further, thank God. All right. Just make sure you're home soon. I made katsudon tonight. I'm definitely on my way. Izuku interrupts, prompting a soft peal of laughter from his mother. Okay, Izuku. See you in a bit. Izuku lets a smile spread across his face at that, replying with, see you then. Once the call ends, he drops his phone back in his pocket and glances back at his arm. Looking at it now, you'd not even be able to tell it was broken. Other than the dirty scuff marks on his otherwise unmarked white gloves, Izuku's arm looks untouched. As for the road rash on his sides, even that's faded away. Of course, there's a few shredded spots in the thigh of his jumpsuit from his escape, but the dark grey hoodie he's wearing over his suit protected it from being torn along his ribs. With a soft hum, Izuku looks around to get his bearings, then heads north, towards where he left his backpack hidden in a back alley. Naomasa sits hunched over at his desk, rubbing at his eyes with an exasperated sigh. He lowers his hands briefly to focus on Sangza in front of him. The younger officer has an amused glint in his eyes, but Naomasa is just tired. So he escaped again? The detective mutters, unsure of whether he's addressing himself or Sangza. Sangza chuckles, moving forward to sit in a vacant rolling chair. As he rests his hands on the desk, he smirks. The boy's a modern-day Harry Houdini. Knocked out 2 of our sturdiest officers before tucking and rolling out the door of a vehicle doing 50 on a busy road. As always though, there were no major injuries. This does nothing to ease Naomisa's growing stress headache. In fact, it only makes it worse. Knowing that nothing the vigilante gecko ever did resulted in severe injuries or death only made it harder to pursue him. Not to mention, he'd managed to help bring countless dangerous villains into custody, so Naomasa couldn't really send pro-heroes after him. He caught the villains the heroes were unable to apprehend. Naomasa sighs yet again. Sangza laughs. We could always just leave him be. He's probably stressed enough. With a quirk like that, he doesn't need us turning up and raining on his parade. That's precisely why we need to catch him and get him to stop, the detective replies. I doubt he's had proper quirk counseling. And the way he uses his body like a punching bag is also likely taking a toll on his mental state. You've seen his change in behavior from his first few appearances to now. Sangza blinks slowly, then heaves a sigh and nods. I see what you mean. He used to be quite nervy and awkward, But now he's a slippery little BSD with a mouth like a sailor and an absurd amount of sass. Naomasa finishes. The younger officer chuckles at his words, looks like he's rubbing off on you. That provokes a smile from the detective, and he allows himself a soft laugh. I suppose so. With a nod, Sangza rises to his feet and faces Naomasa. He gives him a polite bow before taking a breath and speaking again. Right. We'll leave Gecko be for now, but I'll suggest patrols tomorrow night. Thank you. No problem, I'd like to see him doing well as much as you do. Once he's finished speaking, Sangza excuses himself, leaving Naomasa to puzzle over Gecko alone. More specifically, where on earth he'll pop up next and how in the world they'll keep him caged long enough to get him to the police station. As usual, Izuku lazily scrolls through hero forums with his earbuds stuck firmly in his ears and his suit tucked safely into his backpack on his journey home. He rarely needs to look up anymore. He's traveled home from various locations so frequently, he's sure he's developed homing pigeon instincts. The thought alone makes the corner of his mouth twitch upward in amusement at his own thoughts. Just as he's getting lost in hero news, he stops. A flicker of movement in front of him makes him flick his green eyes upward at whoever's there. Although Izuku's learned to sense that familiar, unbridled hostility so thoroughly, it's easy to figure out who's stopped on the sidewalk in front of him. Kaken! Izuku says in a level tone, his brows lowering over his eyes. Katsuki says nothing, but the hard line of his mouth and the crimson fire in his gaze says enough. Izuku's eyes drift over the slightly crooked ridge of his nose, the pale scarring stretching from the bend to just under his left eye. It's been a long time since Izuku's felt guilt about causing that, and he still doesn't regret it at all. The blonde narrows his eyes, sets his jaw, and wedges his hands in the pockets of his red hoodie. With a small spark of amusement, Izuku notes that today makes 6 months. 6 months since Katsuki said a single word to him. What a child. You know, you don't need to be so afraid of me, Izuku calls after him, removing an earbud from his right ear. It's not like I have a quirk, right? Izuku swears he can hear Katsuki's teeth grind. He catches himself, however, realizing his poking is just as childish as Katsuki's silence. Still, he leaves one earbud hanging over the shell of his ear and walks past his childhood friend. Could they even be called friends at this point? Perhaps not. Katsuki still doesn't utter a single word. Izuku doesn't mind at all. Silence is preferable to the verbal poison Katsuki had filled Izuku's ears with for over a decade. Behind him, Katsuki lets out an agitated hiss through his teeth and crosses the road, heading towards his own house. When it's evident Katsuki won't pull anything, Izuku lowers his guard and fixates his attention back on the screen of his phone. A notification for the Hero Discussion server his in pops up as he walks, and he taps on it. Hero_stands_united. #discourse_channel. 1842. Red Riot 420. Okay, but Crimson Riot could totally beat Best Genist in the rankings. Yeet Machine. Genist has a more versatile quirk and is closer to his prime than Crimson Riot, but go off I guess. Red Riot 420. Rude. Red Riot 420. I'm not shitting on Best Genist dude, Best Genist is awesome and super manly, but Red Riot 420. Crimson Riot is like more, man, what's the word for closer or more relatable to your fans? PLSletMrest. Personable sounds like the word you're looking for, my dude. Red Riot 420. YEA, that's the one. Tatsu. Deku's back cake. PLSletMrest. Yee. Red Riot 420. Goddamn dude, you're busy all the time nowadays. PLSletMrest. Yeah. PLSletMrest. I work after school and sheets, so fun times. Red Riot 420. So since you're our resident hero expert, smiley face. PLSletMrest. Oh Jesus. Red Riot 420. You heard that Gecko escaped the cops again today? PLSletMrest. YUH. Red Riot 420. What are the deets? Tatsu. Yeah, spill it Deku. Yeet Machine. I'm hyped for this. Texas Smash Myas. PLSB0SS. PLSletMrest. Well, sheet IDK, too many details, but apparently he picked the lock on his HNDCFFS, knocked out 2 cops and jumped out the door of the cop car. Yeet Machine. My god, that's hardcore. Texas Smash Myas. How the fucking. Tatsu. How good do your effing reflexes have to be, Jesus Christ on a scooter? Peerless let me rest. Bithk don't ask me IDFK. Red Riot 420, that's so manly holy hell. Yeet Machine, I know his quirk is like regeneration or some shit, but like are we sure his quirk isn't just? Yeet Machine, the fucking quirk to just say nope, and he just astral projects TF out of any situation. Peerless let me rest. DMN that'd be useful AF. Peerless let me rest. Oh cock I gotta leave now, I just got home. Red Riot 420, AT just like PM me later or some shit my dude. Peerless let me rest. Gotcha. Pletmerist is offline. By this time, Izuku's reached the front door of his house and locks his phone again, wrapping his earbuds around it and dropping it in the pocket of his shorts. Once he's done that, he pushes the door open and calls, I'm home. Sorry I'm late. Dinner's on the table. Inko calls back from the kitchen, which brings a small smile to Izuku's face. First things first though, putting his backpack away and concealing his suit until he gets the chance to wash it without his mother finding out about his less-than-legal activities. Not only would she be upset about him lying to her and going behind her back, she'd be absolutely frantic when she learns of Izuku's harmful quirk. He heads up the stairs and into his room, still covered in All Might merchandise, but not nearly as much as he'd had before he'd met All Might in person. He takes a moment to glance around at his walls, briefly considering selling a few more posters and adding some more variety to his hero merchandise collection, then moves towards his closet and drops his backpack there. He takes a few more moments to change into a pair of clean Spider-Man sweatpants and a plain grey hoodie, then heads back downstairs. Inko's just placing a bowl of katsudon down on the table as Izuku enters the room, and a smile spreads across her face. Izuku returns it the smile, albeit somewhat more reserved, and sits down. Inko sits across from him with a mug of tea, the smile not fading from her face. Taking a bite of his food, Izuku pps an eyebrow. What? Did I do something? He asks. Inko shrugs with a soft laugh. I'm just glad you got into the school of your dreams. That's right. School starts in 2 days. Izuku nods, unable to stop a smile from spreading across his face. True, it was only the general course he'd been accepted into, having only taken the written entrance exam, but this was enough. He was fine doing hero work on his own terms, and had even gotten into the school he'd dreamed of attending all his life. Maybe I'll go check out the campus tomorrow evening. New_DM. 10:01. Red Riot 420, hey my man, you didn't message me back last night, you good? Peerless let me rest, yay I was just tired. Peerless let me rest, and also had sheet to do to prep for school LMAO. Red Riot 420, AW nice dude. Red Riot 420, you get into the high school you wanted? Peerless let me rest, hell yeah. Peerless let me rest, would you believe me if I told you this Quirkless B yesterday got into UA? Red Riot 420, you what the heck, I am going to UA too. Peerless let me rest, what? Red Riot 420, YEA. Red Riot 420, dude we're gonna meet each other, this is gonna be lit. Peerless let me rest, my god I haven't been this excited about anything in a long time, DVDs. Red Riot 420, dude SAME. Peerless let me rest, so you prop got into the hero course right? Red Riot 420, hell yeah I got into 1A and I can't believe it. Peerless let me rest, DUUDE with a quirk like yours? It would have been easier to get in W that. Peerless let me rest, DMN you're so lucky. Red Riot 420, what class did you get into bro? Peerless let me rest, Mem General Studies. Red Riot 420, and you're OKW that? Red Riot 420, you used to get all excited when talking about UA and you were so sure you were gonna get into the hero course. Red Riot 420, did you try for it? Peerless let me rest, nah I didn't. Red Riot 420, why not? You're super smart and stuff dude, you could have done it. Peerless let me rest, well this is kinda gonna bring the mood down a bit but. Peerless let me rest, I met someone I looked up to a lot and they said something to me that like yeah it made me start running almost on 100% concentrated spite, but also I kinda lost faith in myself when it came to becoming a real butt hero LMAO. Peerless let me rest, by the time I re-evaluated my decisions end sheet and decided. Hey yeah maybe I can do it, even though this dude was kinda an a-hole to me, I was already heading to UA for the Gen Ed entrance exam. Peerless let me rest. So depressed best in me did a stupid. Peerless let me rest. On the bright side though, sometimes general studies students can get moved up to the hero course, so like I still have a chance if I work hard enough. Red Riot 420, dude. Red Riot 420, oh my god. Red Riot 420, that's so manly. Red Riot 420, you def did a stupid but you're optimistic about fixing it and that's inspirational as hell OMG. Peerless let me rest. JHDisTVDVDSF thank you? I mean I'm just tired, but if you think that's inspirational I must be doing something right? Red Riot 420, DVSV hell yeah you're doing something right dude. Peerless let me rest. Ax Javake OMG. Red Riot 420, though I gotta ask. Red Riot 420, is spite like your number one motivator to do things BC? This seems to be a reoccurring thing with you. Peerless let me rest, pretty much yeah. Red Riot 420, I don't know whether to shake my head at you or laugh TBH. PLS let me rest, both options are valid. Red Riot 420, PFFFFF. Peers let me rest, as much as I wanna stay here and let you mock my spite-driven vessel, I'm going out to do some stuff and pick up school stuff today. PLS let me rest, so IGTG. Red Riot 420, okay you angry hobbit. PLS let me rest, I am not that short you butt. Red Riot 420, C. PLS let me rest, call me a hobbit one more time NIS2G as soon as I see your but at you I'm gonna suplex it into the nearest pond. Red Riot 420, smiley face, C. PLS let me rest, I hate you. Red Riot 420, love you. PLS let me rest, fuck you. PLS let me rest, I can't fucking hate you GDI. Red Riot 420, I feel blessed the hobbit loves me. PLS let me rest. Pletmerist is offline. Izuku pushes his rolling chair back from his desk, slapping his laptop shut with a soft clack. Stretching his hands above his head and arching his back in a stretch, he yawns as his mind wanders to the thought of his future meeting with Red Riot, that stares him in the face with total certainty. The thought makes him quirk the corner of his mouth upward in a smirk. He laces his fingers behind his head, staring at the Kamu Woods poster in front of him that contrasts so sharply with the bright primary colors of his All Might poster collection. After a minute or so like that, Izuku takes a breath and rises to his feet. As he moves to change into daytime clothes, he hears Inko call his name from outside his room. Yeah. Izuku responds. Inko cracks the door open, waiting until Izuku's finished pulling on a plain grey t-shirt and a pair of faded jeans before opening it all the way. She's smiling brightly, a piece of notepad paper in her hands as she approaches. Izuku takes it from her when she offers, skimming over it briefly before glancing at his mother. This is a shopping list. I wrote down everything I thought you'd need for school, she says, reaching back to adjust her hair tie, other than what's on the list provided, that is. You never know what you could be missing until the moment you need it. Izuku reads over the list again, paying more attention to each item on it. Most of it is fairly normal, like extra pencils, notebooks, different colored highlighters. Izuku had a habit of meticulously color-coding his notes, and the like, but a few items catch Izuku's eye. Suppressing the urge to laugh, Izuku taps one particular item with his index finger. Sewing supplies? Now that you're going to a hero school, I'm sure you'll be needing to repair your clothes at the drop of a hat. A sewing needle and thread would do you a world of good for those moments you'll need it. Inko explains as she rests a hand on her son's shoulder. Izuku heaves a sigh. I'm not even in any courses where I'll need to repair my clothes. I'm not doing any hero work, so there's no need dash. But you could be transferred up to a hero class. You certainly have the heart, grit, and physical strength to achieve it. There's always a chance, so you'd best be prepared, dear. With that, she gives his shoulder a final squeeze and leaves the room. Izuku stares after her, his lopsided smirk becoming a genuine smile at her words. A sewing needle and thread would also be great for repairing my suit on the fly. Tucking the note into his back pocket, Izuku grabs his favorite oversized All Might hoodie and pulls it over his shoulders. He grabs his phone and backpack, heading outside with renewed enthusiasm. Well, if slightly less tired counts as enthusiasm. The sky is somewhat overcast, the chilly breeze nipping at Izuku's fingers until he tucks them into his pockets. For a moment, He considers taking his phone out and messaging Red Riot again despite saying he'd be offline for a time. However, he quickly changes his mind and chooses instead to focus on the world around himself. One of the Midoriya's neighbors, Mrs. Yamamoto, waves at Izuku as he passes, and he raises a hand the tiniest bit in greeting. She flashes him a smile before returning her attention to a flower pot on her front step. Still, despite the strangely positive and content feeling flooding through his entire being, Izuku can't help but feel antsy. Going to the store and buying school supplies feels far too mundane. Predictable. This, unfortunately, has become a constant nagging thought at the back of Izuku's mind since about a month after he took up vigilantism. Doing vigilante work, it's unexpected, fast-paced and adrenaline-inducing. Before this, Izuku wouldn't have pegged himself as an adrenaline junkie, but now? Izuku rubs at his face with an exasperated groan. I'm going to end up as high-strung as Kaken before the year is up. That statement sits heavily in his mind for a few seconds before he mutters to himself, God, I hope not. Katsuki's in the convenience store he frequents with his two friends from school when he catches sight of Izuku across the road with a shopping list in hand and that same neutral, deadpan expression he's been sporting for close to a year. He pulls at his lower lip with his left hand, brows lowered thoughtfully over his eyes. And even from this distance, Katsuki knows Izuku well enough to notice that Izuku's muttering under his breath. In that same irritating manner. Normally, Katsuki would break into a manic, threatening grin and stride right over there with his two friends to borrow Izuku's money. Nowadays, however, Katsuki wouldn't touch Izuku with a 20-foot pole. You see, Izuku gave off this aura. It was a foreign feeling that had only recently developed. Katsuki had first felt it when Izuku had him pinned to the floor in the school halls, his face devoid of any emotion other than ice-cold anger as Izuku's fists drove repeatedly into Katsuki's face. But even knowing that he could probably overpower Izuku in a 3-on-1 fight, he kept his distance. It was an unsettling feeling that intensified when meeting Izuku's eyes. When he held Izuku's gaze too long, it felt as though ants crawled under his skin and the scar on his face would twinge to remind him of what that shitty nerd could do. I can effing destroy you, his eyes said behind the haze of tired disinterest. Though even despite the stark contrast between Izuku's and Katsuki's popularity, nobody would believe him if he said Izuku wasn't actually quirkless. Izuku pauses across the road, blinking in surprise before turning his head to glance at where Katsuki and his two friends loitered outside the convenience store, slushes in hand. There it is again, that feeling of unease starting to slide its cold claws up his spine. It's not as though Izuku is doing anything, no, he's just standing there with one eyebrow ped. He even has the audacity to give Katsuki a small wave, albeit with that infuriatingly dead expression and half-smirk. Katsuki's not sure what his friends are saying, but is positive they must be talking about Izuku. He lowers his gaze to the lid of his slushie. I can't effing stand him. And now I'll have to deal with seeing him every effing day until I graduate UA. Izuku heaves a sigh, watching as Katsuki mutters something to the two boys that follow him around. He doesn't give Izuku a second glance, but his friends glance between Izuku, supposedly quirkless, and Katsuki with the same mild confusion they always do. They wonder why he doesn't attack me. Izuku shrugs it off. Being ignored is better than being bullied, Izuku knows that all too well. He doesn't need friends if none of them can see him for his character rather than his supposed lack of a quirk. Sking in a deep breath through his nose, Izuku finds his mind drifting off towards the thought of meeting Red Riot in person. A small flicker of warmth ignites in his chest and he continues walking. His online friend knew well enough, or thought, that Izuku was quirkless and treated him like a human being just fine. If that holds up in person, well, Izuku supposes one friend would do him some good. People may be terrible, but being lonely is just as bad. He takes another breath and tucks the shopping list in his pocket, pulling out his phone instead. He scrolls through the Hero News forums as he walks, pausing when his eyes fall on a newly updated article about increased villain activity nearby. He taps on it as he enters the store, deftly navigating down the aisles as he continues skimming over the article. Apparently, villain activity is becoming more coordinated, but the attacks are also suspiciously sparse. Izuku reaches out to grab a spool of thread and a package of sewing needles from the shelf in front of him before letting his eyes flick back to the screen. He reaches the bottom of the article and immediately goes to the comments. Kenji, 945. Brew, this sheet's kinda creepy, I was wondering where all the villain activity went. Kamui Woodstan, 947. Yeah man, I bet they're planning something bad. At least All Might's back though, we're good. Salt Splash, 948. I'm gonna kick a villain but myself SMH. Nothing of importance, Izuku notes with a resigned sigh. He was hoping that someone in the comments would at least have some insight into where the attacks were concentrated, or where the lack of activity was. Nothing but obvious observations and memes, that are honestly just a little funny, grace the comments section with their presence. Oh well. I'll just go ahead and look around for a bit as Gecko. Nothing major, I'll just check around UA. Izuku thinks to himself, ignoring the little mocking thought in the back of his mind saying that the only reason he's doing this is because he wants to see UA again. Which, to be fair, is a valid observation. However, he's still a well-known vigilante and obviously, his first priority is to make sure his future school and classmates are safe from villains. Obviously. He's absolutely not going for the sole reason of gawking over UA. That's absolutely absurd. Izuku pauses. After a few moments, he tips his head back with another exasperated groan at himself. Goddammit, I'm still an insufferable fanboy. Izuku switches apps, over to the messaging app he uses most frequently. Red Riot's icon shows he's still online, so as he continues shopping, Izuku messages him. New_DM. 1114. PLS let me rest, I'm alive. PLS let me rest, did you miss me lol. Red Riot 420, always. PLS let me rest, or you're so sweet. PLS let me rest, it almost makes me forget your Hobbit wisecrack earlier. Red Riot 420, how much money you wanna bet that when we meet I'll be able to use your head shoulder as an armrest? PLS let me rest, none. PLS let me rest, cause I am gonna kill you. Red Riot 420, smiley face, see. PLS let me rest, improb not gonna kill you tbh, you're like my only friend LMAO. Red Riot 420, yeah, you told me about the time you beat the snot out of your childhood friend BC, his actually AD. Red Riot 420, and now everyone in your neighborhood ignores your existence. PLS let me rest, thanks for the reminder. Red Riot 420, oh geez dude, I didn't mean to rub salt in the wound. Red Riot 420, imsary. Ples let me rest, nah man it's okay. PLS let me rest, being ignored is better than getting my face shoved in a toilet or being told to. KMS. PLS let me rest, and I'm going to UA anyways, hopefully people aren't absolute effing walnuts there. Red Riot 420, that's a new insult. Red Riot 420, I should use that. Red Riot 420, but why I can't wait to meet you. Red Riot 420, I'm gonna hug TF out of you. PLS let me rest, ah. PLS let me rest, that's cool but not a fan of physical contact. Sorry man. Red Riot 420, nah that's okay. A crisp high five is good enough if you're okay with that. PLS let me rest, yeah that's good, smiley face. Red Riot 420, okay. I have some things to do so I'ma let you go now. PLS let me rest, sure. Ajuru's not entirely sure why he feels the need to go to UA and look at it again, just the day before he'll be going there. Perhaps it's the need to prove he made it, maybe it's just routine boredom, or maybe he's just curious. Either way, he takes the train across the city and gets off at the stop nearest to the school. Hands in his pockets and hood of his Crimson Riot hoodie pulled over his head, he walks the sun-dappled path up towards the towering silhouette of UA High. Trees just beginning to bud and blossom crisscross over the sidewalk, painting it in stripes of pinkish gold light and smoky gray shadow. A warm breeze sends dead leaves dancing across the pavement and Ajuru heaves a deep sigh. I seriously can't believe I made it in. A sharp-toothed grin spreads across his face, his steps quickening until he's nearly broken into a jog. Everything about this is perfect, the weather, the fact that UA hasn't up and disappeared, and best of all, Ajuru knows this isn't a dream. It's all real. It's absolutely real. He skids to a stop when a thick branch snaps off a tree and crashes into the pavement about 10 feet in front of him. Immediately snapped out of his excited thoughts, Aizuru blinks once. The moment he does, there's a shout of, "Oh, sweet Jesus!" and someone falls a good 4 meters from the trees onto the sidewalk. Something cracks loudly as the person's back smacks into the ground and groans, muttering curses under his breath. The sheer ridiculousness of the situation slows Aizuru's processing speed momentarily, but soon enough, he finds himself recognizing the familiar green jumpsuit, red waist pouches, and dark gray hoodie. He chokes out, "You Gecko!" The vigilante doesn't seem to hear him at first, pressing his right hand into his back and still mumbling curses as he rolls onto his stomach. Aizuru takes a breath, trying not to make a joke or snicker at how utterly ungraceful Gecko is. Instead, he walks a little closer and repeats himself, "You're Gecko, right?" Gecko turns his head, cutting off his stream of profanity. He focuses on Aizuru for a moment, and his entire body stiffens momentarily before he hisses through his teeth and sits up on the concrete. There's a few seconds where neither of them speaks, then they both speak at once. "Well, this was embarrassed dash. Oh my god, are you okay dash?" Aizuru stops, snorting with laughter. He offers Gecko a hand, and the boy gives Aizuru a grateful nod before taking his hand. This is fine and all, but Aizuru notices Gecko's left arm dangling unnaturally at his side and on instinct, immediately exclaims, "Holy shit dude, your arm. Are you okay?" "Oh," Gecko glances at his arm, then back at Aizuru with a one-shouldered shrug, "It's just dislocated. Once I pop it back in it'll reset itself in 2 or 3 minutes. 5 minutes if I just leave it as it is. I can pop it back in for you, bro." The vigilante waves his uninjured hand dismissively. "Oh, no, it's fine. Not a fan of physical contact. Sorry man." At his words, Aizuru stops with a jolt of surprise. A sense of déjà vu sets in. "Didn't Deku say that to me just a little while ago?" With a shake of his head, Aizuru pushes those thoughts to the back of his mind until later. Instead, he just flashes Gecko a grin and laughs, "I've reset a dislocated arm before, dude. It won't take 10 seconds. Gecko seems to ponder this for a few seconds, then heaves a sigh and presses a hand to his forehead. "Okay. Fine. Whatever. Let's just get out of the open first. Please." The exasperated tone does nothing to deter Aizuru at all. He's always prided himself on his resilience, and he happily follows Gecko off the path to where he sits on the grass behind a few barely flowering shrubs. Aizuru drops down on the grass next to his left arm. Gecko stares at him for a few seconds before muttering, "You smiling at me like that makes me feel mildly threatened." "Oh, sorry." Aizuru laughs, still smiling, "It's just, I never thought I'd get to meet you in person." Gecko seems startled by Aizuru's words, and begins to speak, but is abruptly cut off by Aizuru popping his arm back in. The vigilante hisses through his teeth as Aizuru releases him. Flexing his arm and wiggling his fingers for a few moments, Gecko whistles and says, "Not bad. Better than I could do, if I'm being honest." Aizuru beams. "Glad I could help you out. Were you hurt anywhere else, or?" Gecko shrugs. "I think I cracked a rib, but it's probably healed by now." "Okay, I'm glad you're feeling better." Rising to his feet, Gecko looks at Aizuru in silence for a few moments. Even so, Aizuru doesn't feel threatened or unnerved in the slightest. In fact, he feels like he might just begin spontaneously vibrating across the grass like a cell phone on a desk. This day just keeps getting better. So, Gecko starts in a rather awkward tone. Aizuru picks up on his nerves, flashing the vigilante a grin as he, too, jumps to his feet. "What's your dissonance handle? We could exchange memes and stuff." "Ah. What?" Gecko presses a hand to his chin, holding his head in his hand. There's a moment where the only sound other than the breeze rustling through the trees is the vigilante humming nervously, then Gecko lets out a high-pitched laugh. "I don't think that's dash." Gecko clears his throat, then continues in a normal-pitched voice, "I don't think that's a great idea." "How come right? You probably don't want anyone finding out your secret identity, right?" Aizuru whispers as he shoots Gecko a smirk and finger guns. "Something like that," the vigilante mumbles in a low voice. It takes a moment for Aizuru to notice the way Gecko wrings his fingers at his sides anxiously, but when he does he immediately backs off with his line of questioning. He gives the other boy a cheerful smile and raises his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Sorry if I made you uncomfortable, dude. I didn't mean to." At his words, Gecko jers his head up and immediately stammers out, "Oh, no, don't worry about it too much, I'm just very," he pauses, "I'm just not really supposed to be out doing this sort of thing." "What? Your mom gonna lecture you about being a vigilante if she finds out?" "Oh God, I'd never hear the end of it." Gecko laughs softly, reaching up to scratch at the side of his head. "Don't get me wrong, I love my mother a lot, but I'd rather not have her learn about this if I can help it. She'd probably have a heart attack worrying about me." The sun begins sinking lower in the sky, both their shadows growing longer and more defined as they talk. As time wears on, however, Aizuru begins to notice the way Gecko keeps casting glances around as if worried about the time. Finishing up his current story and drawing a final chuckle from the vigilante, Aizuru gives Gecko another broad grin. "Well, I should let you go now. You've probably got vigilante stuff to do." "Yeah. More like I have my mother to worry about." Gecko snorts in a light tone, which pulls another laugh from Aizuru. The two of them hold each other's gazes for a moment, then Gecko makes one last gesture with his hands and turns to leave. As he does, however, he glances over his shoulder and calls, "It was nice talking to you." "Yeah, it was awesome meeting you. I hope we meet up again sometime." Aizuru doesn't miss the way Gecko stiffens at his words and moves into a jog before vanishing from sight. Again, there's that nagging suspicion at the back of his mind that he probably has encountered Gecko before, and not necessarily in the real world. By the time Izuku returns home and crawls in through his bedroom window, the sky is dark and his phone's been dinging with notifications from his dissonant servers for the past 45 minutes. Inko is long asleep, unaware of her son's unconventional means of entering the house. Which is, in Izuku's opinion, a good thing. Seeing as his entrance into his room is anything but graceful, with him banging the top of his foot on the windowsill and falling forward so his face connects with the carpet floor at a much higher force than Izuku finds bearable. Even so, Izuku's quite used to pain and the only noise he makes is a heavy, long-suffering sigh as he drags himself into his room and sits back on his knees. He managed to change out of his costume shortly after parting with Red Riot, jamming it in his backpack and catching the last train back home. Chucking his backpack towards his bed, he double-checks his appearance and stands up with another sigh. Now that he's safely home, he reaches into his pocket for his phone to check his messages. The servers have pretty normal interactions between the members, mainly consisting of light arguments about up-and-coming heroes and surreal memes, but it's the one message in his DMs that catches his attention. Izuku chokes on air at the content of the message. New_DM. 2159. Red Riot 420, you get home okay? Peerless let me rest. I was home most of the day LMAO. Red Riot 420, you sure? You were offline all day. Red Riot 420, not out doing igno vigilante stuff? Peerless let me rest. Bifk TF you smoking. Peerless let me rest. I was helping my mother with stuff and prepping for school tomorrow SMH. Red Riot 420, you sure fam? Peerless let me rest, sure as sheet. Peerless let me rest, you also know I'm quirkless as F right. Peerless let me rest, what am I gonna do? Run around with a gun and shoot villains like some Clint Eastwood wannabe? Peerless let me rest, where the heck am I even gonna get a gun? Guns are illegal unless it's an authorized support item. Red Riot 420, mtatsva. Red Riot 420, well you're never gonna guess what happened today. Peerless let me rest, enlighten me. Red Riot 420, I ran into Gecko while going to check out UA. Peerless let me rest, bullshit. Red Riot 420, would I lie to you? Peerless let me rest, fair. Peerless let me rest, what was he like? Red Riot 420, well. Red Riot 420, he was clumsy and kinda weird. Red Riot 420, but a good dude. Red Riot 420, I'd be hella down for chilling with him more. Peerless let me rest, that's gay. Red Riot 420, dude I am gay. Red Riot 420, and your pan so your argument is invalid. Peerless let me rest, afdi kesvd true. Peerless let me rest, Well, that's cool and all, but like I have some shit to do and I gotta get to sleep soon. PLS let me rest. I'm gonna let you go now then. Red Riot 420, wait. Red Riot 420, so we can see who's in which class on the lists and meet up. Red Riot 420, my real name is Kirishima Eijiro. Red Riot 420, what's airs? Laughing face. PLS let me rest. Midoriya Izuku. Red Riot 420, I have a name to match the pic you sent me of your face a while back. PLS let me rest. You kept that stupid picture. PLS let me rest. I took that before I was even fully awake. It's a shitty picture, delete it. Red Riot 420, NOPE, love. PLS let me rest. Well fucking fine. PLS let me rest. I kept that pic you sent me right after you dyed your hair red. Red Riot 420, that's gay Midoriya. PLS let me rest, see. Red Riot 420, well I'll let you go now, laughing face. I can't wait to meet you tomorrow. PLS let me rest, SAME. PLS let me rest, night. Red Riot 420, night. Red Riot 420 is offline. Pletmerist is offline. Izuku lets a small, lopsided smile spread across his face as he plugs his phone in and sets it down on the table next to his bed. Without even bothering to remove his t-shirt and sweatpants, he flops down face first on his bed, hastily sets his alarm, and closes his eyes. I think I covered my butt pretty well there. The nerves in Izuku's stomach refuse to settle. He's tried drinking tea and jogging a few kilometers, as well as reading hero forums, but nothing he does seems to dispel the anxiety washing over him in waves. Hell, he even took a hot shower long enough that Inko had to tell him to get out. Even that didn't work. He just can't help feeling nervous and antsy when he doesn't have his vigilante getup hidden securely at the bottom of his backpack. He heaves a sigh as he steps off the train and makes the trek towards the imposing glass silhouette of UA High. Around him, countless more students wearing the UA uniform mill about, chattering amongst themselves and quickly growing acquainted with each other. Izuku, however, keeps his hands firmly on the straps of his backpack and his head lowered. Old habits die hard, he supposes. He continues walking like that, occasionally bumping shoulders with students that wander too close. He ignores it. After all, as soon as someone learns that he's quirkless, they'll either attack him for it or marginalize him completely. He passes by the place he encountered Eijiro the night before, almost pausing to look. Shaking his head, he continues onward. Izuku's almost to the gates when a shock of familiar, bright red hair catches his eye next to the gate. He blinks in surprise. He's pretty sure it's Eijiro, but he can't exactly tell. The crowd does nothing to help his case. With an exasperated sigh, he slips between two students and weaves over to the last place he saw the red-haired student. It takes a while, but he eventually reaches the person leaning against the wall next to the gate. A thrill of excitement courses through him like lightning. That's a pretty wild hairstyle. He comments, unable to keep the note of excitement out of his voice. Immediately, the boy whips his head up, crimson eyes wide. His mouth curves into a jagged-toothed grin and he shoves his phone in his pocket, completely foregoing his earlier vow to refrain from excessive contact. He throws his arms around Izuku's torso with a laugh, lifting him completely off the ground. The contact makes his skin itch and crawl, the same way it does whenever he prepares for a villain or less-than-friendly vigilante to deal him a nasty wound. Eijiro only seems to remember his promise when Izuku purses his lips and goes completely stiff. When he does notice, however, he immediately puts Izuku down and backs up a few steps. "Oh man, dude, I'm so sorry I even said I wouldn't dash," he begins, but Izuku shrugs. "It's not a huge deal," Izuku says with a shrug even as vague anxiety begins to set in. "It was an accident. But I promised I wouldn't touch dash. Kirishima. It's fine." Izuku sighs, running a hand through his hair. Izuku considers himself good at hiding his emotions. Still, it takes all of his willpower to not rub at his skin wherever Eijiro touched. He knows well enough that his friend wouldn't ever hurt him intentionally, but his skin still burns. Like it always does whenever someone other than his mother touches him. The doctor he saw called it hapaphobia, the fear of physical contact. He asked for circumstances leading to the development of this fear, but of course, Izuku couldn't really up and say, I fight villains and my quirk basically makes me about as killable as a cockroach, so getting carved up like a Christmas turkey is a daily thing with me. Though, Izuku's last fight with Katsuki had made the doctor, his mother, and his teachers believe that Katsuki's bullying had been the cause of Izuku's condition. It had at least averted that potential crisis. He doesn't notice he's zoned out until Eijuru's voice cuts through his thoughts. Okay? Midoriya? Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking about some things, he reassures with a now genuine smile as the burning sensation fades. Eijuru watches Izuku for a few moments longer, a slightly worried expression of his face, before he heaves a sigh. Okay. I'm glad you're feeling better. Izuku nods as the two of them turn and begin walking side by side towards the front doors of UA. Just as Izuku opens his mouth to start a conversation, though, Eijuru stops and lets out a sharp exclamation. Izuku glances at him in confusion. What? I meant to do this earlier. Eijuru says, reaching back into his pocket and pulling out his phone. I wanted to take a picture of us. A picture? Yeah. You know, like, to commemorate our heartfelt first meeting. The redhead laughs, and his enthusiasm is just contagious enough to bleed onto Izuku. He finds himself smiling as well. He shuffles closer to Eijuru as he opens the front camera and holds his phone out in front of him. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Izuku finds himself appreciative of the care Eijuru puts into making sure he doesn't touch him. As he's thinking this, there's a click and Izuku blinks in surprise. I zoned out there, can we do that again? Izuku asks, but Eijuru's already moving to check the image. He shifts the phone screen, letting Izuku see. There's a beat of silence as Izuku lets himself take in the picture. Then he groans, I look like crap. Can we try that again? Nope. Eijuru chirps. I look like a zombie, look at the bags under my eyes. You always look like that. Oh gee, thanks, you're such a fantastic friend. Eijuru explodes with laughter, doubling over and hugging his stomach as Izuku drags a hand over his face with a groan. Though, his attempt to appear exasperated is thwarted by the smile that creeps across his face. This only makes Eijuru laugh harder. Strangely enough, Izuku doesn't feel bothered by the weird looks the other students give them. Weird. He's about to urge Eijuru to move on, towards the school, when Izuku feels the familiar burning itch of scarlet eyes burning into the back of his head. His smile fades. Izuku turns his head and meets the blazing red eyes of Katsuki, about 10 feet behind him. He turns completely to face his old friend with his usual unreadable smile. Hey, he greets. There's a beat of tense silence, Katsuki watching Izuku for a few seconds, before he heaves a sigh and brushes past Izuku. What catches Izuku off guard, however, is the fact that Katsuki mutters something under his breath. Stay away from me. It's nothing new from Katsuki, but the fact that he spoke to Izuku is enough to wipe the stone facade off his freckled face. Eijuru moves up beside Izuku, blinking after Katsuki in surprise before glancing at Izuku. Was that the guy who bullied you? Yeah. Izuku replies, that was him. Eijuru whistles. You really did a number on his face, dude. His nose looks like a smashed Play-Doh project. At his blunt comparison, Izuku snorts and glances at Eijuru's grinning face. It's not that crooked. Oh, it totally is. You're blind. I'm pretty sure I'd know if I was blind. Are you sure about that? That comment almost earns him a swat on the arm, but again, Eijuru stops himself before touching Izuku. Instead, he throws his arms up in mock exasperation and groans dramatically. Before he can launch into a joking tangent about Izuku's argument, however, the two enter the school and stop short at the daunting sight before them. Students make an intimidating impression, milling around in close proximity as they look for the class lists and struggle towards their classrooms. The thought of pushing onward through the throng makes Izuku's skin crawl, but Eijuru picks up on his discomfort and shoots him a blinding grin. I'll go up and check for your name if you wanna wait here, man. Izuku opens his mouth to instinctively brush off his offer, but catches himself and instead replies, sure. Thanks, Kirishima. The slightly taller boy gives him a nod before moving forward to where the class lists are displayed on small screens in the wall. While waiting, Izuku backs up to a less crowded area and checks his phone. Seeing no new notifications from the servers he's in, he heaves a sigh and changes apps to play a mindless mobile game. Before long, Eijiro returns and Izuku puts his phone away. "You're in Class 1C, down that way," he says, jabbing a thumb over his shoulder towards one wing of the school. "I've got to head the other way though. So I guess we're going our separate ways?" Izuku nods reluctantly. "Looks like it. When can we meet up again?" "After school?" Izuku nods. "Sounds like a plan." With that, the two part ways and head for their classrooms. It's not that hard to find 1C, what with the sheer volume of students chattering about their homeroom down the halls. Izuku just follows the tidbits of information he picks up from the students and navigates his way through the school. After a short walk, he finds himself just outside the door to Class 1C. The familiar sensation of anxiety in his stomach makes itself known, and Izuku takes a few deep breaths to calm his nerves. This is going to be different. Nobody's going to treat me like they did in middle school. He finds it hard to believe his own thoughts. Finally, he pushes open the door and enters the room. It's packed with a wide variety of students, from a boy with a low-poly white rabbit head to a girl with fluorescent green hair, and everything in between. The sight is daunting to Izuku at first, but he forces himself onward with his eyes fixated on the ground. Each desk has a paper name tag resting on its surface to indicate which student belongs where, and Izuku almost heaves a relieved sigh to find his desk in the back right corner of the room. This, at least, helps ease his nerves a bit. Before he's even dropped his bag on the floor under his chair, there's a girl with very short brown hair turning around in her seat to rest her crossed arms on his desk. The quick gesture makes Izuku tense momentarily, but the lazy smile on her face makes him relax. Minutely. "Heyo," she greets. Izuku purses his lips, lowering his gaze again and hoping she goes away. Instead of doing that, though, she just removes her arms from his desk and snorts in amusement. "I don't bite, man. But if you want me to leave you alone, that's cool." Izuku looks up and she extends a hand. "Natsuki-jiyu." The thought of taking her hand makes him anxious, but he does so anyways and tries to ignore the way his palm prickles. "Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you." Despite the way his voice comes off as annoyed and cold, Natsuki gives him a smirk. "You don't sound too thrilled to meet me, Midoriya, you don't need to lie." I didn't mean dash. Izuku immediately stutters out as guilt hits him like a truck. Natsuki laughs. "Chill, I'm just joking. You should have seen your face though, Jesus." "Oh, for the love of dash," Izuku groans. "I've known you for less than a minute and I'm already tired of you." She catches the almost indecipherable note of humor in his tone and snorts. "Oh, you'll never not be sick of me." "So anyways," Izuku sighs, attempting to divert the conversation elsewhere, "what's your quirk?" Natsuki blinks in surprise, then replies, "Poltergeist. I can do anything you'd normally associate with a poltergeist phenomenon. Flickering lights, slamming doors, making cold spots, levitating small objects, scratching or pushing people without touching them, you know. That sort of stuff." Immediately, Izuku drops his indifferent facade. "Oh my god, that's so cool." "Not really? I can't really be a hero with it, which was what I wanted to do in the first place. But nothing I can do would be any use in a hero's line of work." Natsuki seems slightly taken aback by Izuku's sudden change of attitude, but doesn't call him weird or creepy, which is definitely a first in Izuku's book. It's a rather nice first. Natsuki answers all of Izuku's questions easily despite how quickly he fires them off. In fact, Izuku would almost be so bold as to think she's enjoying talking about her quirk with him. She's even smiling when she talks. When Izuku runs out of questions, his mind burning with notes to jot down in his analysis notebooks, Natsuki surprises him with a question of her own. "So, what about you? What's your quirk?" God, Izuku wants to tell her about everything he's discovered about his quirk. He really does. The only thing stopping him is the fact that she seems incredibly bright and would probably connect the dots within a minute and discover that his gecko. So, he reluctantly mumbles, "I don't have one." Natsuki widens her eyes. "You're quirkless?" "Yeah. There's a brief silence hanging heavily between them before Natsuki remarks in an awestruck whisper, "Holy shit. I know, I shouldn't be here dash." "Oh shut up, Midoriya." Her groan takes him off guard, but when he glances up, she's grinning at him. "That's not what I'm thinking at all. I'm just really shook you managed to get into UA even without a quirk. That's insane." Izuku opens his mouth to say something back, but is cut off when another student slides into the desk on Izuku's right. Natsuki and Izuku both glance at him curiously when he seems to completely avoid them. He has wild purple hair and tired violet eyes underlined by bags, and seems dead set on ignoring everyone else in the classroom. Even so, Natsuki leans precariously far out of her seat, so far, in fact, that Izuku feels himself tense up in case she starts to fall, and smacks a hand down on the strange boy's desk. He gives her a look that's equal parts annoyed and curious, mouth still set in a line. "Sup?" No response. "My name's Natsuki-ju, this is Izuku Midoriya, and you are?" For a moment, Izuku's pretty sure the boy's going to go back to ignoring them. After a few beats of silence, however, he mumbles, "Hitoshi Shinsu." "Nice to meet you, Shinsu," Natsuki says with a grin. Izuku gives a small, slightly awkward wave with his own crooked smile. "Hey. Oh come on, you can do better than that." Natsuki groans, which prompts a dirty look from Izuku. Though before they can begin arguing, Shinsu speaks. "Why are you two talking to me?" Izuku gives him a sour look. "Rude." "Yeah, Midoriya and I are absolute delights, I'd say." Natsuki splutters in a mock tone of superiority. "No, I mean, Shinsu sighs, what makes you think I'm someone you want to talk to?" Trying and failing to suppress a mischievous smirk, Izuku points to his own tired eyes, lack of sleep and a dead-eyed stare. "You look lonely." Natsuki replies at the same time, and the two exchange a surprised look. Izuku jabs a thumb at Natsuki. "Her reason is better, so we'll go with that." At their exchange, the corner of Shinsu's mouth twitches as though he's fighting off a smile. Even so, he coughs out a stifled laugh. "Jesus Christ, you two are dysfunctional." "At least we're not boring," Natsuki shoots back with a grin. Shinsu's shoulders relax minutely, Izuku notes, and he finds a warm sense of satisfaction blossoming in his chest at the sight of a small smile on the other boy's face. Making people happy hadn't ever really been Izuku's strong suit. He just butted into villain fights, subdued the target, and fled the scene before the authorities could catch him. This usually meant the only person who was ever happy with the outcome was Izuku himself. Making someone other than his mother happy is certainly something that Izuku could get used to. Interrupting his thoughts, Natsuki reaches into her pocket with a small exclamation and pulls out her phone. "Hey, have you guys got dissonance handles? It's the only messaging app one use and I wanna spam you guys." Izuku nods. "Yeah, I do. I have one, yeah." Shinsu adds, which makes Natsuki grin from ear to ear. "Great. My handle's Yeet Machine number 4908. At the mention of that handle, Izuku stiffens. "Wait. What? Are you in a server called Hero Stands United?" Natsuki blinks in surprise. Yeah, I am. Wait." Izuku laughs. "My name there's PsychoLimbo number 2177. Oh my god, you're Deku." The exclamation makes a few other students turn their heads to look at Natsuki, but the curiosity doesn't last long. They soon go back to chattering among themselves. Once they do, though, Shinsu heaves a sigh. "Mine's kinda stupid, but it's Mind Eraser and the number is number 9996. "It's not dumb," Izuku says as he sends Shinsu a friend request. "For 2 years, my handle was SmallMite08. That's a dumb handle. I already see how much better your current handle fits you." Shinsu deadpans without looking up from his screen. Izuku flicks a pencil at him. Instead of whacking Shinsu in the arm and rolling to the floor, Shinsu somehow manages to catch it after briefly fumbling with it and tucks it into his pocket. Natsuki wheezes with laughter as Izuku involuntarily makes a scandalized noise. Shinsu's grinning now, leaning away from Izuku, who's swiping repeatedly at his new friend's pocket and mourning his pencil. Before he can get the stolen utensil back, though, there's a shout from the front of the room, "All right, settle down now." Instinctively, everyone glances at the front of the room to see who'd shouted. After a brief moment of silence, everyone shoots into their seats while chattering excitedly. Izuku understands their reactions completely. After all, the pro-hero Midnight is standing at the front of the room in unusually modest clothes, waiting for the noise to die down, and is almost unable to stifle his fanboyish muttering before it starts. From there, the pro-hero places a stack of papers on the desk at the front of the room and clears her throat. As some of you may already know, I'm the pro-hero Midnight. As your teacher, however, I ask you all to refer to me as Kiyama-sensei. After her brief introduction, she goes through roll call. She calls each student's name in alphabetical order, scribbling something down on a sheet of paper whenever the student called confirms they are present. As she finishes taking attendance, Izuku finds himself oddly excited. A new ambition makes itself known in his mind. I'll prove All Might wrong. I'll become a goddamn hero even if I have to claw my way there, whether or not I get certified for hero work. Toshinori wanders the halls in his true form, a ghost of a smile on his face and his eyes passing over the masses of students heading to the cafeteria for lunch. Becoming a teacher is certainly something he'd never anticipated when he was attending this school himself, but now he's certain he quite likes it. Seeing the future heroes learning and growing is incredibly inspiring, he thinks. His train of thought comes to a screeching halt when a shockingly familiar head of hair splits off from the crowd. Toshinori stops dead, eyes wide, when he sees none other than Izuku Midoriya walking away from his friends to presumably go to the bathroom. He's still the same freckles, the same face, eyes, hair, and so on, but there's something definitely not right with the boy. There's an almost jaded look in his eyes, so different from the hopeful light Toshinori had seen all those months ago. His smile isn't as genuine, tired bags below his eyes, and his shoulders are more slumped than they used to be. Immediately, Toshinori feels a stab of guilt. Is that because of what I told him? As if hearing his thoughts, the boy's eyes find Toshinori's and his face goes several shades paler. He immediately ducks his head and dodges back into the crowd of students, vanishing from Toshinori's line of sight. Even so, the hero moves forward quickly enough and manages to grasp Izuku's shoulder, stopping him with a soft, "Young Midoriya?" What he doesn't expect is for the boy to SCK in a loud breath, his entire body to go stiff, and his feet to leap a solid foot off the ground. Izuku spins around, eyes wide in panic before Toshinori's hand lifts from his shoulder. As soon as it does, though, the strained, tired look returns to his face. He heaves a sigh. "You." It said levelly, not a single emotion in his tone. The sound is so different, so wrong, from how it was on that rooftop when Izuku laid his heart bare. Toshinori quashes down the urge to ask what happened, instead clearing his throat and giving him a nervous smile. "Mind if I talk to you for a bit? I have a few things I wanted to say to you, but I couldn't find you after the incident with the other boy and the sludge villain." Toshinori doesn't catch the way Izuku's nails bite into his palms, or how his heart starts drumming frantically against his chest like an animal in a cage. Even so, he ensures that he treads carefully with his words and actions. After what seems like an eternity, Izuku runs a hand through his hair with another sigh. "Okay." Toshinori gives Izuku the best grin he can muster, moving to lead the way. He's almost sure Izuku's going to turn around and leave, but after a moment's hesitation, he hears the boy's footsteps on the linoleum behind him. They make their way away from the crowd, towards the staff room. When he turns the corner towards the room, though, he realizes he can no longer hear Izuku behind him. He turns and glances. Over his shoulder. "Young Midoriya?" Like a ghost, the students vanished. While walking, Izuku had discreetly removed his shoes to minimize noise and bolted away, searching desperately for someplace to hide. The boys' bathroom closest to the cafeteria had been the first place he'd found. Now, alone in the bathroom, he digs his nails into the skin of his shoulder where All Might had touched him. Izuku knows well enough there's nothing wrong with his skin there, there's nothing touching him anymore, and All Might had no intention to hurt him, but his skin still burns. His heart beats erratically, his breath coming in short, desperate gasps as a panic attack takes hold of him. All he can think about is the sudden weight of the hero's hand on his shoulder, pressing down. Izuku's fully aware he's reacting irrationally, but he can't help it. This is just another roadblock in his life he forces himself to push through. Got it, he thinks, I was going to talk to him face to face. There's no helping it, however. For now, all he can do is work through his panic and wait for All Might to come to him again. Because there's no effing way I'm gonna be able to face him myself after disappearing on him like a wimp. Welcome _to hell. 1620. Yeet Machine, Midu. Yeet Machine, I didn't get to ask you before, but where'd you go at lunch, my dude? You just like vanished. Mind Eraser, yeah. Mind Eraser, you looked really out of it too. PsychoLimbo, I'm good, just got a stomachache. PsychoLimbo, I get nauseous when I'm stressed. Mind Eraser, mood. PsychoLimbo, thank you for the overwhelming sympathy, Hitoshi Shinsu of Jackass Island. Mind Eraser, DMN. I should put that nickname on a resume. PsychoLimbo, you'll be reduced to a single atom when I'm through with you. Mind Eraser, thank Jesus. Yeet Machine, I'm going to kill you both, I swear to God. PsychoLimbo, you can try. Mind Eraser, Peerless. Yeet Machine, there are two kinds of people on this beach of an earth. PsychoLimbo, apparently. Yeet Machine, Midoriya, you can eat my left shoe. PsychoLimbo, can I get a side of curly fries with that? Mind Eraser, GHDVKDSIBSIBJB. Yeet Machine. Yeet Machine, I'm done. You guys are horrible. PsychoLimbo, can I still have that left shoe though? Yeet Machine, it's gonna be introduced to your face at high velocity if you don't cut the sass. PsychoLimbo. Yeet Machine, okay, I'm going offline now, BC, you're both insufferable and my train is here. Yeet Machine, later shitheads. Yeet Machine is offline. Mind Eraser, haha, I'm going offline too now actually since my stop's coming up. Hope you're feeling better, Midoriya. PsychoLimbo, I'm always fine. Mind Eraser, whatever you tell yourself to make yourself sleep easier at night. PsychoLimbo, okay, wow, that was rude. Mind Eraser, just let us know when you're feeling like shit. It SCKS dealing with that stuff alone. Then, and only then, will I cut the sass. PsychoLimbo, okay thanks. Mind Eraser, NP. Mind Eraser is offline. Pletmerist is offline. Ajaru's waiting at the gates of UA again for Izuku at the end of the day. The sun's starting to sink low in the sky, and Ajaru's beginning to wonder if Izuku had just slunk out a back exit and went straight into vigilante mode, if he really is Gecko and Ajaru's not completely nuts, but his worries are soon appeased when he sees Izuku working his way through the throngs of students towards him. Just like earlier, his head is lowered and his shoulders are drawn in as he subtly distances himself from anyone who could possibly touch him, whether it's by accident or on purpose. The sight makes Ajaru's heart hurt again, but he shoves it down, reminding himself that this is just how Izuku is and the best he can do for him is respect his boundaries. He raises a hand with a grin and waves. Midoriya, hey. Izuku's head comes up and, oh god, he looks worse than he did in the morning. His skin is pale, his eye bags somewhat darker than they were, and there's a distant look in his eyes. The glazed-over look fades away a bit when he recognizes Ajaru, but his smile seems forced. Hey! You okay? You look awful. Ajaru asks in a low voice. Izuku worries at his bottom lip with his teeth for a short time. Then, he sighs. I'll be okay. I'm just a bit overwhelmed. Oh, Ajaru hums, yeah, someone like you would probably get pretty anxious in a big school. Izuku's reply isn't convincing at all, but Ajaru forces back the urge to pry. Izuku will tell him when or if he feels like it. They make their way towards the train station and Izuku's eyes go back to being glued to the ground. The distant, glassy look is back and Ajaru can't help but wonder. Is that what vigilante work does to someone? As usual, Izuku waits until his mother's breathing has lapsed into the rhythm of deep sleep before he gets out of bed and shoves a pillow underneath his blankets. He's never known his mother to come check on him closely in his sleep, so the pillow's always been perfectly sufficient. Once that's taken care of, it doesn't take him long to pull on his suit and clamber out the window with all his equipment. The night is clear, the waning moon high above as a cool breeze blows through the quiet streets. Izuku jumps down to the ground, softening his fall by rolling with the impact. If there's one thing Izuku's learned in his time as a vigilante, it's that broken ankles really aren't fun. Izuku may be no stranger to pain, but that doesn't mean he's willing to hurt himself. Reckless, yes. MSCST, no. With one last glance over his shoulder, he pulls his mask over his head and breaks into a jog. If I hurry, I can jump on the train to Hosu and get there in time for peak villain activity. Rather than boarding the train like a normal civilian, however, he follows his familiar route to a small walking bridge that crosses over the train tracks. Behind him, the sound of the approaching train rumbles into earshot. With a quick huff of breath, Izuku hops up and perches on the railing of the bridge like some odd, green-clad gargoyle. Eyes narrowing in focus, Izuku waits until the bridge vaguely vibrates from the train before hopping off of it. His feet hit the roof with a familiar jolt of pain as he momentarily scrambles for a secure hold on the roof. Once he's caught hold and safely kneeling, braced against the force of the wind, he lets himself relax a tiny bit, just enough to let his muscles relax, but not enough to lose focus on the route ahead. I'm not too excited to get splattered on the roof of a train tunnel again. That certainly wasn't one of Izuku's proudest moments. Thankfully though, Izuku's spilled blood evaporates within 5 minutes of leaving his body, so no civilians or train operators had the misfortune of discovering a nasty red skid mark the size of a fridge on the roof of a train tunnel. Good God, that had been quite the relief to discover. On the bright side, Izuku now knew to keep extremely focused while train surfing, so there's that, at least. Getting almost vaporized had its perks, in an absurdly morbid sense. Speaking of which, Izuku catches sight of a train tunnel ahead and ducks down. He presses himself flat on his stomach against the roof of the train car. Intense winds shriek thunderously around him, bouncing off the narrow walls of the tunnel and viciously whipping the tufts of Izuku's mask around. For a moment, he's worried that maybe his suit will tear, but before that worry can come to fruition, the tunnel opens up into open sky smudged with city lights. Now, he sits back up on his knees and watches with amusement as passers-by gawk at the vigilante train surfing at almost 1 in the morning. A snicker bubbles past his lips as a thought pops up in his head. I wonder what that detective would do if he saw me doing this? A pretty detailed image of Naomasa choking on a cup of coffee and staring at Izuku with wide, horrified eyes presents itself in his mind. Oh my God, I've got to let him see me doing this at some point. Before he can finish his thought though, he recognizes the familiar shape of the first stop in Hosu ahead of him. He rises to his feet, double-checking to make sure neither of his electric rods manage to slip out of their holsters, before bracing himself and hopping off the train towards the chain-link fence surrounding the tracks. As always, he winces at the jolt of pain that shoots up his forearms from the impact, but pushes through it and climbs over. From there, he breaks into a dead sprint and ducks through the crowd until he reaches the entrance to one of the many tangled alleyway systems in Hosu. This way, he has a higher chance of encountering villains. Shouter's not sure when the last time he had a decent sleep was, but at this point, he could care less. To him, despite absolutely loving whatever chance he gets to actually get a decent rest, sleeping takes a lot of time. Time that could be better spent cracking down on villain activity. Even so, as he pursues a villain with a speed and agility-enhancing quirk, he finds himself wishing that rather than running through Hosu like a maniac after an equally deranged villain, he were face down on his bed with his cat. That would be far preferable to this bullshittery. Finally, the villain hits a straightaway, sprinting and leaping across the rooftops at high speed. He's more focused on getting away than his own movements, and Shouter sees his chance. Grabbing his capture weapon, he prepares to snare the villain's foot. Gotcha motherfucker! Dash comes a strange shout from Shouter's right, making both of them glance to the side in surprise. A fiberglass rod sparking with electricity flies through the air like a javelin and smacks into the villain's side with a resounding smack. Less than a second later, the villain screams and collapses from the electric shock. Scrambling rather ungracefully up onto the roof is a very small person in a green suit. After a brief moment of confusion, Shouter recognizes the vigilante as the one he'd heard some members of the police force discussing on several occasions. The one that had apparently evaded all capture attempts thus far, even escaping a police car full of armed officers, barehanded. Though, it's difficult for him to look at this very, very short teenager and see anything other than a misguided child. Oh Jesus, you're Eraserhead. Awesome. The voice pulls Shouter back into reality and he nods with a grunt of affirmation. Instead of continuing the pleasantries, however, he sighs and dives into the heart of the matter. You're aware vigilantism is illegal, correct? He says in a low voice as Gecko idly nudges the unconscious villain with his foot, bending down to pick up the rod he'd thrown. Yep. And you continue to do it regardless. Yep. Gecko replies, popping the P. Shouter's eyebrow twitches. Shouldn't you be in bed? You look a little too young for hero work. Shouldn't you be in a coffin? You look a little too dead-eyed for hero work. Gecko immediately shoots back without missing a beat. For a moment, Shouter just stares, taken aback by the blunt and sudden response. It takes him so completely off guard that it strikes him speechless. After a moment, a pleasantly surprised ghost of a smile finds its way onto the hero's face. Correction, a sassy misguided child. Seemingly unbothered by Shouter's presence, Gecko kneels down and pulls a few zip ties out of the pouches at his hip. He hums an oddly familiar tune under his breath while he works at securing the villain's hands behind his back. Finally, Shouter shakes himself out of his stunned stupor and starts approaching Gecko. He's likely aware of Shouter's approach despite having his back turned, but Shouter knows the policy on vigilantism. Apprehend like I would any other villain. Just as his hands tighten around his capture weapon, Gecko spins around at uncanny speed and flings something in Shouter's face. Immediately, his eyes burn and he splutters at the taste of sand. He staggers backwards, blinking furiously to expel the sand from his eyes, and vaguely catches the sound of Gecko saying, "Don't try it, demon." When Shouter finally clears his eyes, he glances up to see the villain still lying on the ground and a little green blur disappearing off the side of the building into one of the many winding alleys. He wastes no time in pulling his goggles down over his eyes and sprinting after the little BSE. As he chases the afterimage of Gecko, he finds himself thinking that maybe the kid's quirk isn't incredible regeneration, but rather a quirk that allows him to escape any situation. He rounds a corner, ready to shoot into a narrow alley, when something invisible smacks him in the face and clotheslines him. With a string of curses, he untangles a length of packing tape from where it caught his head. When did he have the time to put this here? Regardless, he keeps sprinting as he painfully wrenches the tape from his tangled hair. By this time, he's running entirely on guesswork and estimation as to where Gecko had gone, but it's not long before he hears the sound of squealing brakes and a loud thump. He rounds a corner and bursts out into the open. Shouter barely manages to dodge a bystander, staggering to a rather ungraceful halt and "Goddamn it!" Shouter glances up to see Gecko staggering to his feet, green suit marred with blood and road rash. One hand is pressed to his side, where what appears to be a rib pokes through his skin. For a moment, Shouter almost forgets that Gecko has a regeneration quirk and feels the slightest inklings of panic rise in his chest at the sight of a wounded teenager running from a collision with a vehicle. Quickly, he quashes down his worry and pursues Gecko again. Needless to say, Gecko doesn't get very far down another alley before Shouter insares his ankle and pins him to the ground. As Shouter holds Gecko down firmly, the vigilante snickers. You know you don't have to be so careful with my injuries, I heal pretty effing fast. His voice is slightly strained, I'll assume he still feels pain. You talk quite a bit for someone who's supposedly tight-lipped. Shouter begins in a flat tone, would you mind telling me who you are under the mask? The white eyes of Gecko's mask narrow as if he's smiling and he replies, Lara Croft. Wrong answer. The hero twists Gecko's arm and pushes it up his back in a vague threat to cause harm. This only earns him a bubbly giggle from the vigilante. You're acting like busting my arm's gonna make me talk. Nah man, breaking my arm is about as close to an off switch as you can get with me. Unless what you wanna hear is some heavy breathing through my teeth, a few nasty words, and maybe a bit of muted crying because I'm once again forced to come to terms with the fact that no matter how much good I do, I'll never be appreciated for it and I'll die alone, hated, and forgotten. Silence. Shouter heaves a sigh. Risking Gecko's escape, he brings up a hand to rub at. His eyes. Now I understand exactly why that detective wants to get you caught and into therapy. Oh boy, therapy. Gecko exclaims, man, I love therapy. I went to therapy for 4 years cause my teachers in elementary and middle school thought I was the reason I got the sheet kicked out of me. Funny, right? But get this, they thought I was the problem even though I was the one being attacked for no reason. Was that oversharing? I think that was oversharing. Well, it's too late to turn back now, we're past the point of no return dash. Shut up, you insufferable chatterbox. Chatterbox. I like it. Should have made that my hero name. It would have fit you better than Gecko. Rude. But valid. Now that Gecko seems momentarily out of things to say, Shouter takes the opportunity to pull his phone out of his pocket and call Naomasa. As he brings it to his ear, Gecko seems to grow very interested in his hand. Who's the lucky dude, Eraserhead? Gecko teases in a tone that Shouter can only describe as sheet-eating. It takes him a moment to understand what Gecko means, but when he does, he steals a glance at the ring on his finger and sighs. Bold of you to assume my significant other is another man. Bold of you to assume my gaydar isn't the strongest thing since the Hubble Space Telescope. Shouter squints at the boy. Gaydar. Gay radar. I have a pretty good sense of who around me is gay and who's not. It's pretty helpful, I'd say. Kinda like Ragdoll's quirk from the Wild Wild Pussycats. Except, I detect dash. Alright, I know what a gaydar is. I was a teenager once. Gecko blinks. Oh wow, really? You really give off a distinctly immortal aura though. Like Jeff Goldblum. I picked the worst possible vigilante to pursue, Jesus Christ. Regret catching me yet, Eraserhead? The boy snickers as if reading Shouter's thoughts. He forces down the wave of irritation that rises up in his chest, instead clearing his throat. Once he's composed himself, he takes a deep breath and lets it out slowly. Gecko was only looking for a reaction. Shouter had to remain calm and collected until the authorities arrived to take this little bestiality away. Finally, he manages to make the call to Tsukochi and waits for his voice to come in from the other end of the line. It's not long before it does. Tsukochi Naomasa here. It's Eraserhead, and I appear to have caught your gremlin here, Shouter replies. Can you come get him before he manages to talk me to death? You caught Gecko? Yeah. Come get him. Please. Send me coordinates and I'll have a crew out there immediately dash. Gecko must have picked up on Tsukochi's voice, because he immediately lets out an excited exclamation and shouts, Is that Detective Naomasa? Oh man, I love that guy. Oh god, Tsukochi sighs on the other end. Shouter tightens his grip on Gecko, but the boy wriggles around and turns just enough to look at Shouter with both eyes. Man, me and Tsukochi go way back. He's been chasing me around for 3, 4, 5, 9 months. Isn't that great? You should see the look on his face whenever I get away. He looks like Betty White after skiing on a lemon. It's so funny, you gotta see it this time dash. You're not, Shouter hisses, getting away this time. Gecko blinks with feigned innocence, before bringing his hands up to his face and whispering, Oh really? How are his hands? Shouter has no time to form a coherent thought because Gecko shoots out from under Shouter like a cat, spinning onto all fours before rising to his feet and sprinting away. The hero drops his phone to the concrete in his panic, reaching for his capture weapon and sending a loop of it out towards Gecko's arm. He's momentarily relieved when it wraps around one of his wrists, but immediately chokes on air when Gecko pulls a knife from one of the pouches at his hip. Shouter braces himself for a fight, but Gecko brings it down in a single swipe and slices his own hand off. Granted, it wasn't the cleanest cut Shouter's ever seen, since Gecko had to make a bit of a sawing motion to sever the bone, but he's quick to let the decapitated hand fall and keep running. The sight of it shocks Shouter into inaction for a solid 5 seconds, his mind trying to catch up to what fuckery he'd just witnessed. Though when he does finally will himself to break into a run, he manages to find Gecko pretty quickly. Or maybe he just walked right into another one of Gecko's nonsensical traps. But either way, he found the boy. He's caught off guard by something slamming into his side as he rounds a corner, hitting him low and throwing him off balance. Gecko knocks him sideways before tackling him to the ground. As they struggle, however, Shouter becomes aware of Gecko trying to wrap more goddamned tape around his arms. Granted, he's having a tough time due to his lack of a hand, but Shouter has to give him some credit. If he didn't know any better, he'd swear the kid was growing on him. Eventually, Shouter manages to wrestle the kid to the ground, knock the roll of tape away, and hold him there. With a smirk, he comments, "Maybe you should have just run away, problem child. You might have managed to escape then." Hey, I'm not out of ideas yet, Eraser. Shouter takes this moment to glance at the stump of where Gecko's hand used to be and tries not to wince. Gecko seems to notice his concern, though, and wiggles the fingers of his one remaining hand with a laugh. "You're acting like it's a big deal that I cut my hand off, man. It's really not anything important, you know I deal with stuff like this every day." That's exactly the problem. He's cut off by a loud series of crackling noises and a blast of smoke from Gecko's stomach area and immediately fears the worst, that maybe Gecko has some sort of explosive to help himself escape tight squeezes. In his worry, he leaps backwards off the vigilante and finds his vision obscured by thick, white smoke. Waving a hand in front of his face and coughing, he stumbles backwards out of the smoke screen and looks to where Gecko had last been. Gecko's nowhere to be seen. Thoroughly intrigued by the whole experience, Shouter finds himself smiling incredulously. "Well played, problem child. Well played." Several blocks away, Izuku leans back against the wall of an alley, tucked between two dumpsters. His breath comes in ragged gasps, punctuated by harsh coughs. He pulls the bottom of his mask up to free his nose and mouth, then he coughs painfully and a small stream of blood dribbles down his chin. "Oh, my God," he gasps, "I haven't run so hard in months. I don't think I've collapsed a lung from overexertion yet, maybe one of my ribs punctured my lung?" Trying to ignore the burning on his skin where Eraserhead had touched him, Izuku slides down the wall to sit and catch his breath as his lungs heal and waves of pain radiate up his arm from where his hand slowly starts to regenerate. While he waits, he shakily reaches his remaining hand down into one of his pouches and withdraws his phone. The screen is slightly more cracked than it was before his scuffle with Eraserhead, but it's still functional. Which is good. There's a few notifications on his screen, and he opens it up to check what Hitoshi and Natsuki had said while he was busy fighting an underground hero and getting his butt kicked in the process. Ready_for_def. 101. Yeet Machine, Mido must be dead. Yeet Machine, that's the only explanation for him not being online at ungodly hours of the night. Mind Eraser, I mean him sleeping is a viable option but go off I guess. Yeet Machine, the F is asleep. Peerless let me rest. You're right. I am dead. Peerless let me rest. Come see my memorial serves, my funeral sing is Jeepin' AB Space Jam. Yeet Machine, yes. Mind Eraser, I can't even act surprised at this point. Peerless let me rest. K well then what's your fucking fine tal som? Mind Eraser, no, please, continue having a slide. It doesn't make it harder to read your messages or anything. Peerless let me rest. Well fick you tpo. Peerless let me rest. You go get your hand CYT off and I to text. Ick WS. Mind Eraser, hang on let me go grab a meat cleaver and test that. Yeet Machine, press F to pay respects to Mido's hand. Mind Eraser, F. Yeet Machine, F. Peerless let me rest, F. Peerless let me rest. Alright the hand cramps are gone. I'm no longer having an aneurysm. Mind Eraser, it's a goddamn Christmas miracle. Yeet Machine, it's April. Mind Eraser, don't undermine my sad attempt at humor. Mind Eraser, Peerless. Yeet Machine, K. Peerless let me rest, IG to G, I'll talk to you guys in the morning. Yeet Machine, LMAO don't die. Peerless let me rest, death is inescapable for all except me. Mind Eraser, you poor soul. Mind Eraser, imagine not being able to die. Mind Eraser, that's like my worst nightmare. Yeet Machine, big ass mood. Peerless let me rest, okay good night. Yeet Machine, night. Mind Eraser, Latera. Pletmerist is offline. Izuku drops his phone back in his pocket, glancing at his slightly undersized hand in frustration. That was always something that bothered. Him about his quirk, the regrowing PhD. Not only were the cramps annoying as hell, the time PhD was way too long for Izuku's short attention span. Which also made for some pretty irritating close calls when he was running late to get home and needed to regrow a piece of himself quickly. Not to mention the pain of removing a limb. Izuku didn't really like severing his own limbs if he could help it, if only because of the pain that came with it, but at least he'd grown incredibly adept at hiding his own pain. That had been evident in the way Eraserhead had reacted to Izuku's nonchalant treatment of his own absent hand. Goddammit, now I need to make a new glove. That thought hits Izuku out of the blue and he brings a hand to his forehead with a groan. I knew I should have bought cheaper material for the gloves. No longer feeling the throbbing in his lungs, Izuku wipes the blood from his chin and pulls his mask down. He rises to his feet. Buzz. His phone vibrates in his pocket. With a sigh, he reaches into his pocket for his phone and sees the screen light up with a notification from Red Riot 420. Izuku puts his phone back in his pocket, mentally telling himself he can answer Aizuru when he gets home. He can't afford to waste any more time, he needs to hop on a train and head home. With a contented hum, Izuku stretches his arms above his head and moves toward the nearby fire escape leading to the roof of a building. There's one thing Izuku wants to do to further irritate his favorite detective. So he got away. Tsukochi groans as he takes in Shouter's appearance. His face is smudged with dirt and glue from the packing tape Gecko had supposedly caught him with. A small strip of tape still clings to Shouter's hair, his clothes are dusted with a fine layer of ash, and his hands are marred with small cuts from the struggle he'd had. Shouter reaches up to pull the tiny piece of tape from his hair. He did. Tsukochi heaves an exasperated sigh. I'd hoped we'd have him in custody tonight, but I suppose we'll have to try again another day. Actually, Shouter begins, I think I'll take it upon myself to catch him. That earns him a few confused looks from Tsukochi and Sangza. Why the sudden interest? As far as I know, this isn't usually something you'd pursue. Vigilantes, that is. It's then that the hero gives him a ghost of a smile and chuckles. He's an enigmatic little BSTD. If anything, he's piqued my interest and I'd like to see just how remarkable he is, if your reports are anything to go by. I see, Tsukochi says with a curt nod. Well, as long as you make an active effort to catch him, I see no issue. Rather, it helps our case immensely to have a hero solely focused on this endeavor. Shouter begins speaking again, when Sangza taps his shoulder. Turning, he sees the cat-faced officer seemingly holding in a laugh and glancing at his work phone. Someone using a temporary email address just sent a series of images to the branch inbox. Apparently, it's for you. I wonder who that could be, Shouter says in a deadpan voice, eyes glittering with amusement. In all honesty, Tsukochi used to find this somewhat funny. Nowadays, however, the idea of you-know-who sending something to him via a self-deleting email address is exhausting. Like Gecko's making a mockery of Tsukochi's efforts. Sure enough, when the detective pulls his phone out to check the police branch's shared inbox, there's an email from a temporary email site that deletes all traces of the email address after 10 minutes. It's quite an irritating site, if Tsukochi's being honest, but even after looking into the whereabouts of the sender, it's only been traced to public computers in CCTV camera blind spots. Meaning Gecko's well aware of what he's doing and is far too skilled at it. Here we go again. From 6gfsdxy@intj.org to branch 675@.jp. Subject, Huo. This message contains 2 attached files. Hello friend. I had fun messing with Eraserhead tonight. You guys should really send some more pro heroes after me. Heroes are pretty cool and fighting them's even cooler. Essius about my hand though, it's back now so that's good. I have a bit of beef All Might so like it'd be cool if you guys sent him after me but I mean, that's a lil scary too since he's the #1 hero but fighting All Might would be like, the highlight of my entire NGL. How's it going though Naomasa my dude my guy? You're so cool I feel like we're best friends since we see each other so often, which is why I attach these images. Our top 2 best anime moments from today Love, Lara Croft. P.S. Tell Eraserhead that him en present MIC our goals cause him at least 12% sure has married to MIC. P.P.S. Can you ask a Razorhead if he likes cats? BC I like cats too, but I'm too awkward to ask him Meisler Felmo. Peepibus myself haha it's late I'm tired and healing takes a lotta energy outta me asgxcita. Attached files below. By the time Tsukochi finishes reading, Shouter and Sangza both glance over his shoulder at the screen. Sangza tastefully turns away and hides his laughter with a bit of coughing. Shouter, on the other hand, hums in amusement and reaches over to scroll through the images. What a sassy little sheet, he comments. Imagine if this kid was doing legal hero work, he'd be a hell of an underground hero. Tsukochi groans, this is all because of his bad mouth and poor taste in humor, isn't it? Partially, yes. The majority of my reasoning is because of his skill and ability to change and formulate his escape plans on the fly. I'm mildly impressed. Mildly. Sangza and Tsukochi exchange a glance before the detective sighs and puts his phone away. He pinches the bridge of his nose in exasperation. We greatly appreciate your help, hopefully this'll get us closer to finally getting him dealt with. At that, Shouter gives him a nod and turns away, pulling his goggles back up over his eyes. Before he leaves, he pauses. Then, he glances over his shoulder with one eyebrow raised. Couldn't you just run some DNA testing on the severed hand? We would, but, Sangza replies, reaching up to scratch awkwardly at the side of his head, all genetic material simply evaporates after 5 minutes of being separated from Gecko's body. Blood, severed limbs, skin cells, hair, spit, vomit, you name it. The only thing that hasn't vanished are his fingerprints, but none of our testing has come up conclusive. It's both intriguing and frustrating. Tsukochi nods. As you said earlier, he's quite the enigma. He'd be an excellent hero with some counseling, some proper training, and a sense of self-preservation. Shouter scratches at the stubble dotting his chin thoughtfully. He lets out a low hum that catches Tsukochi's interest, but to his dismay, Shouter just shakes himself and raises a hand a bit in farewell. I suppose I'll be off, then. Contact me whenever you get news of him. I'd like to be present when he's finally taken into custody. Preferably by my hand, but we'll see what happens. Tsukochi nods, watching as the underground hero turns away and melts into the shadows of another narrow alleyway. Once he's gone, the detective sighs and scratches at his head. Hopefully this tips things in our favor. By the time Izuku hops off the train and heads for his house, exhaustion blurs his vision and makes his hands shake. He's doing the math in his head, determining just how long he has to sleep before he needs to wake up for school, and it's not looking good. I'll just sleep through my lunch break and between classes. It's not like I'll die of starvation, anyhow. Lack of sleep makes him irritable, and that irritation is increased when he thinks about the cost and effort of repairing his missing glove. The needlework, the rubber finger pads, the cost of fabric that'll work, it's making him mutter bad-naturedly under his breath. Once he reaches his apartment building, he makes his way up the fire escape as far as he can. After running out of ladder, he shuffles along the wall using small footholds he discovered months ago. Carefully, he slides his bedroom window open and climbs in. He watches his rods to make sure they don't bang on the windowsill, only relaxing once he's inside with the window closed. His hand still seizes up with cramps every odd minute or so, but it's bearable. Nothing like the pain of losing it. As he quietly removes his costume and tucks it away in its hiding spot, he finds it harder to keep his eyes open. Even so, he forces himself to ensure all his not-so-legal belongings are hidden where his mother won't find them. Once he's sure they're safely tucked away, he pulls on a worn All Might t-shirt and fresh boxer shorts. It's only then that he plugs his phone in and flops unceremoniously into bed. Before he lets himself slip into unconsciousness, he pulls up his phone and lowers the brightness until it's bearable to look at. Then, he opens his messages. Meme_machine. 324. Red Riot 420. I just finished reading up on some more news articles and I'm frustrated. Red Riot 420. IDK if you're up or around but someone with a hardening quirk sorta like mine assaulted another guy in Camino today, just because the dude was quirkless. Red Riot 420. How awful do you have to be to hurt someone just because they are quirkless? They're still another human being and we should treat them just like any other person. Red Riot 420. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm never gonna be a DJ to you BC of you being quirkless dude. Red Riot 420, and if anyone tries being shitty to you just whom you because I will throw hands. Red Riot 420. I mean I'm sure you can kick some major but on your own since you managed to turn Bakugu's face into a Picasso piece your fists without using a quirk, but yeah, if you need backup I'm your guy. Red Riot 420. Sorry for ranting here, I just want you to know I'm ride or die for you man. Red Riot 420, night, love. Red Riot 420 is offline. Peerless let me rest, you're probably sleeping now but. Peerless let me rest, I've never had anyone other than my mother say anything close to that before. So thank you. It means more than you know, to hear that. Peerless let me rest, night /. Pletmerist is offline. Izuku chalks it up to being overtired and stressed, but what Aijuru said really hit home. Whatever it is that stirs such an uncharacteristic wave of emotion in his chest, Izuku ends up crying himself to sleep. Not that he'd ever admit it to anyone. The following day, Izuku walks up to the gates of UA looking like a corpse. This isn't anything new. Aijuru knows it's a cold day in hell when Izuku Midoriya actually looks like anything but a corpse, but the rings under his eyes are darker than they were yesterday. Not to mention, he seems very determined to stare a hole in the floor in front of him with those dull green eyes. He's so out of it, he almost slogs right past Aijuru without noticing him. It takes a slightly louder than normal call of Izuku's name before the curly-haired zombie stops and looks up. Aijuru flashes him a bright grin. Hi, Midoriya. Izuku blinks slowly like a cat. Hey. Did you sleep last night at all? You look dead. Izuku finishes for him with a grin devoid of joy. Yeah. You okay? Aijuru prods, ping his head at his friend. Izuku shrugs, wincing minutely as he adjusts his right hand's grip on his backpack straps. I'm never okay, Kirishima. But right now? I'm less not okay. Aijuru notices this and nods towards his hand. Dude, did you hurt yourself? Oh, Izuku begins, casting an unbothered glance at his hand. I was just writing late into the night. Wrists a bit sore. Will you be okay to write notes? Izuku snorts. I appreciate your concern, but your notes are gonna be useless to me. I'm in Gen Ed, remember? I was gonna ask if you had friends in Gen that could write anything for you, dude. Aijuru laughs. I know I won't be much help, I can barely read my own handwriting anyways. Izuku blinks owlishly at him. Oh. Yeah, I have friends. Too. Oh, really? Can I meet 'em sometime? Only if you introduce whatever friends you make to me. You're the kind of guy who makes friends easily, and I want to see what kinds of people you manage to rope in with your overwhelming charm and ridiculous puppy eyes. Izuku jokes with a vague smile, one that actually reaches his eyes. That's enough to convince Aijuru that Izuku's mood's improving. He returns the half-smile with a blinding grin of his own and gives Izuku a thumbs up. Sure. Think we could all eat together at lunch? We could have a huge friend squad and hang out. Izuku opens his mouth, and Aijuru sees what's coming. Please don't make a Suicide Squad reference. Izuku closes his mouth. Kirishima, I don't think you understand how easily you walk into these opportunities for me to make a shitty reference. Because at any given time, I'm more than ready to make a shitty reference. Aijuru lets out an exaggerated groan and tips his head back. Has it never crossed your mind that you really don't need to make shitty references? Yeah, it has, Izuku replies with one of his slightly unnerving grins, but where's the fun in that? The two of them start towards the front doors of UA, exchanging small talk. They're almost to the doors when a girl's shout comes from behind them. Midoriya! Hey! Aijuru and Izuku stop to look behind them, and Aijuru sees a strange girl. She's waving wildly and sprinting after them with a broad grin. When she skids to a halt in front of the boys, Aijuru notices the slight chill radiating off her and the eerie quality to her voice, like quiet static on an old TV. Regardless, she seems nice, so Aijuru's completely open to knowing her. Hey, Jiyu. The girl, Jiyu, glances at Aijuru, looking him up and down before looking back at Izuku. Who's this dude? Izuku gestures to Eijiro, replying with, "He's a close friend. We've known each other online for a while." Jiu glances at him again, this time with wide yellow eyes. She excitedly offers him her hand while grinning, "Natsuki Jiu. Call me Natsuki." Now comfortable with the strange girl, Eijiro takes her hand and shakes it with a smile. "Kirishima Eijiro. We're gonna be late." Izuku interrupts their introductions in a deadpan voice, only indicating his amusement with a barely decipherable undertone. At his words, Eijiro releases Natsuki's cold hand and starts off towards Class 1A. He gives Izuku and Natsuki a final wave as he leaves, before running down the hall. As he goes, he passes a classmate of his named Shouto Todoroki, who gives him a mildly curious look as he goes. He skids into his homeroom class just after Katsuki Bakugo, who snaps a few curse words at him as he brushes by. Eijiro isn't particularly bothered by his friend's former tormentor. His opinion doesn't matter much to Eijiro at this point. Maybe it never will. He's not sure. When Eijiro moves to sit down in his seat, the boy who sits in front of him turns to face him with a wave of his hand. "Hey, Kirishima." "Hi, Kaminari. What's going, dude?" Kaminari shrugs with a lopsided smile. "Played video games until like 2 last night. I have some regrets." Eijiro snorts at that, and Kaminari turns completely around to rest his crossed arms on Eijiro's desk. "So what did you do last night? Your Discord showed you were online till like 1:30. His mind drifts back to the messages he'd sent Izuku last night, and the strange way his friend had responded at almost 3:30 in the morning. It had been hard not to bring it up with Izuku as soon as he saw him, especially considering how terrible Izuku looks, but Eijiro knows how hard it is to get Izuku to share anything personal and decided against it. Nothing really important. Just reading news articles and messaging my friend, he chooses to reply, which is pretty much the truth. Even so, Kaminari raises his eyebrows with a suggestive smirk. "Right. News articles. It really was just villain stuff, man. Just some guy assaulting a quirkless civilian." Eijiro sighs. Kaminari's skeptical expression fades at that, replaced with mild concern. "Shit, dude, really? God, people are stupid. You're telling me?" They trail off into more comfortable chatter then, mostly consisting of Kaminari's experiences playing games the night prior. He grows more and more excited as he talks, gesturing wildly with his hands and his voice raising into an excited tone as he describes his in-game fight with a high-level Dark Souls boss. At some point during their conversation, 2 other students drew near to listen, one a girl with pink skin and horns and the other a boy with black hair and oddly shaped elbows. Kaminari, after finally finished retelling his successful gaming session, turns to look at the 2 other students who drew near. "Mina Ashido and Hantashiro, I think? Ashido and Shiro, right?" Kaminari asks the pair, giving voice to Eijiro's thoughts. "You guys had super cool quirks in the assessment yesterday." Mina's hands flail in excitement and she bounces on the ball of her feet with a grin. "Oh my god, thanks. You guys too, Kirishima and Kaminari, right? You guys were so cool." Kaminari beams. Immediately shifting in his seat to face her better, the odd duo start enthusiastically gushing over how cool each other's quirks are. Eijiro's completely fine with watching them talk. They're entertaining to watch, seeing as both of them gesture a lot while talking, but Shiro gives Eijiro a smile. "It's cool to meet you, Kirishima." Of course, Eijiro immediately returns the smile and extends a hand. "It's awesome to meet you too." Once the formalities are out of the way, Shiro begins talking about Eijiro's quirk and how useful it'd be for bashing high defense villains. As he does, Eijiro fights the urge to protest, to say no, it's really not all that great, but he also hears Izuku's nagging voice telling him, "Say what you want but it's better than no quirk at all, you unbelievable goosefoot," and various other confusing pseudo-insults that really didn't feel like insults at all. Regardless, he holds back the urge to be self-deprecating, mostly out of fear that Kaminari, Shiro or Ashido would let it slide to Izuku at lunch that he'd been talking that way again. Eijiro's not sure what Izuku would do, but knowing his weird friend, it would probably involve the beginnings of a school-wide food fight, an unending string of improvised curse words that make zero sense, and at least one student casualty. The sound of present MIC heralding his own entrance into the classroom sends the students scrambling to their seats, and Ajiru's thoughts are abruptly interrupted. As the eccentric teacher slaps his clipboard down on the podium and launches into roll call, Ajiru can't help but feel excited for lunch. Leg bouncing feverishly below his desk, Ajiru tries his best to focus on class. Though he's doing his best to focus, Ajiru's never been the best at paying attention in class, and the anticipation of meeting Izuku's friends certainly isn't helping his case at all. Classes are pretty average, like they were in middle school, consisting of general subjects featuring their occasional tie-in to heroism. Other than that and the fact that mundane classes are being taught by pro-heroes, Izuku sees little difference between middle school and high school. In fact, as Izuku's finding out at the moment, some of the prejudice against the Quirkless remains. He's currently facing a classmate of his, a stocky, pale boy with eyes that constantly shift color. Fascinating. Do they change color depending on his thoughts and emotions? Could that be advanced into a chameleon-like quirk that works on the whole body? Who scowls at him? Arms crossed, the boy looms a solid foot over Izuku and hisses in a voice barely more than a whisper, "A quirkless nobody shouldn't be allowed into UA. You don't deserve to be here." Years and years of instincts pounded into him by Bakugo scream at him to back down, to make himself small and escape the situation. Those thoughts, however, only feed into Izuku's irritation and make his blood burn like molten lead. His eyebrows lower over cold green eyes. A snide grin finds its way to Izuku's face and he meets his classmate's gaze, knowing full well how unnerving it is when he does so. The minute tension that sets into the taller boy's shoulders and the glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes tells Izuku his intimidation tactic seems to be working. "I'd say I'm completely qualified to be here, Koyama. On the contrary, I find it pretty hypocritical of you to say the quirkless don't deserve to attend when your own quirk is so useless. You may as well be quirkless in the first place." That hits a nerve. Izuku sees it in the way Koyama stiffens, how hurt flashes in his eyes, and the way his arms come uncrossed and his hands turn into fists. Izuku knows he should stop. Antagonizing the boy, should slip past and leave him reeling in the hall. But that's no fun at all. So of course, Izuku sees just how far he can push Koyama. "In fact, I'd say I have more right to be here than even you," he continues, feeling guilty for his arrogant words but pressing onward, "seeing as I scored higher on the entrance exams than you did." Koyama's nails bite into his palms. Weight shifting from foot to foot, Izuku can practically hear the other boy's internal struggle, whether to throw a punch or not, what'll happen if he does throw one, and whether or not beating up a supposedly quirkless student is a good idea. With a sheet-eating grin, Izuku tilts his head at Koyama. "Got something else to say? You look like you're about to sheet a brick there, Koyama." For a moment, Izuku's sure Koyama's going to throw a punch. He can see it in the way his anger flares and his weight shifts, and Izuku's already preparing to deflect it. Strangely though, Koyama suddenly backs off, his whole demeanor changing from aggression to something much less intimidating. Gaze locked onto the floor like it's the most interesting thing in the world, Koyama stammers out, Sorry. I'll leave you alone, Midoriya. So sorry about this." With that, Koyama turns on his heel and speed walks down the hall, head still lowered and shoulders drawn in. Izuku glances after him with one eyebrow ped before wedging his hands in his pockets and shifting his weight to his right foot. "Here. I intimidated him that much, here. Guess he saw my posture and changed his mind. Or maybe he decided the consequences would be far more dire than in whatever middle school he." His internal monologue cuts off abruptly as he feels someone else watching him down the hall, opposite the way Koyama had gone. Izuku glances towards the feeling of eyes on him and sees none other than the underground hero, Eraserhead. The very hero he'd fought the night before. The bedraggled-looking man moves leisurely down the hall towards Izuku, deliberate and silent as a cat. He comes to a stop a comfortable distance away and looks Izuku up and down with mild interest. "Is there a problem?" he asks in the same low voice Izuku remembers. In response, Izuku shrugs and reaches up to run a hand through his hair, just some chucklefuck who thinks it's funny to intimidate the quirkless kid. "Nothing important." Eraserhead gives Izuku a scrutinizing look at that. In my opinion, it's unacceptable for students to harass one another, quirkless or not. Did he do anything or threaten you at all? Izuku blinks at the hero in surprise. He did at first, but I scared him off. You don't need to worry if he does come at me though. I'm sure I'm capable of defending myself just fine. This school actually gives a sheet about quirkless people. That's new. Eraserhead blinks slowly, once again looking at Izuku as if seeing him in a new light. I see. Well, there are to be no fights on school grounds. Speak with a teacher if he continues to harass you. It'd be a shame to see such an enigmatic student end up a target. Izuku's entire body goes rigid. Does he know? Is he suspicious of me? Green eyes burning with a defensive light, Izuku meets Eraserhead's gaze. Without breaking eye contact, Izuku gives the hero a vague smile and says, I appreciate it, but I don't need more people fussing over me than I already have. I'm quirkless, not helpless. Following his words, he gives Eraserhead a teasing smile and laughs. Besides, what's he gonna do? Kill me? The scrutinizing yet surprised look the hero gives him tells Izuku that perhaps he'd said more than necessary. Immediately backpedaling furiously, Izuku drops the cocky facade and lets the awkwardness he actually feels slip through the cracks. In an odd voice, he attempts not to stumble over his words, sorry to waste your time. I'll just be going now, my friends are waiting for me. I see, Eraserhead mumbles with a dismissive nod despite the look in his eyes, I suppose I'll see you soon. As Izuku walks away towards the cafeteria at as steady a pace he can muster, he mutters under his breath, sooner than you think. Shoto's not necessarily thrilled to eat in the cafeteria. The noise, the constant contact with strangers, and the thought of having to find a seat at some other table with random students while forcing his way awkwardly through social interactions is only slightly more appealing than dealing with his father, which still isn't very appealing. Which is why he's taking his food away from the noisy sea of students to a more quiet part of the school. The tongue-lashing his father had been giving him over the past 2 days about making an intimidating enemy for his classmates has run his nerves thin and set him on edge, which is why he leaps almost a solid foot in the air when another student rounds the corner and nearly bumps into him. The student looks just as shocked, if not more. There's a few seconds where neither of them say anything. When those silent few seconds are up, however, the curly-haired student's glassy eyes glimmer with recognition. That jabs at Shoto's irritation. Here comes the inevitable, you're Endeavor's son. But that irritation is quickly dispelled when the student heaves a sigh and mumbles, God, I run into all sorts of people. Can I help you? Shoto slowly asks, squinting at the boy. He shakes his head, sending messy green curls into even more disarray. No, not even God can help me at this point. I'm way too far gone. Who the dash? Oh, Endeavor's your old man, here? There it is. Shoto lets out an agitated breath through his nose, closing his eyes. Yeah. God, I'm so effing sorry, dude. Shoto's head snaps up and his eyes grow wide at the stranger's words. After the initial shock passes, he blinks a few times as if trying to clear his head. Excuse me? The boy gestures vaguely towards Shoto. I mean, you really don't seem to like the guy if your body language is anything to go by. I feel you. Dash. So I'm letting you know now, I hate Endeavor more than I hate wasps. And I really effing hate wasps. He's a goddamn prick with an attitude problem and an ego the size of Canada. The student rants, dragging his palms down his face as if even talking about Endeavor is causing him immense pain, and you have no idea how many times I've had the opportunity to dump a pail of ice water on his stupid effing firebeard and not taken the opportunity because it's not socially acceptable and illegal to hinder a hero while working. He rolls his eyes and makes air quotes with his fingers while saying that last part, then finishes by crossing his arms and scowling. Hero my butt. Maybe it's the shock of hearing this complete stranger roast Endeavor to within an inch of his life, or maybe it's the exhaustion and fried nerves. Either way, Shoto snorts. He catches himself before he can actually laugh, choking on his own spit as he tries to force back the urge to, and the student just gives him a cat-like grin. When Shoto finally manages to compose himself, he gives the student the vaguest ghost of a smile and quietly murmurs, "Only one person's managed to do it before." Douse his face in water. "Only one person's done it before." He repeats, slightly louder this time. The student's eyes sparkle. Mischief glimmers in their depths, as if he already knows this little tidbit of information. "So who did it?" Adjusting his grip on his food, Shoto replies, "Gecko. That vigilante wearing the lizard fursuit." The student looks taken aback. "Fursuit? Fursuit, yes." A pause. "I mean, good on him for extinguishing the dumpster fire, but like," he takes a breath, "it's not a fursuit." Shoto blinks. "It looks a lot like the fursuits I've seen on the internet. It's definitely a fursuit." "You don't think it looks even a tiny bit like All Might?" "No. Not even a little. No." The student tenses his hands in front of his face, taking a deep breath with closed eyes. "As a Gecko ally, I gotta tell you that, he based his suit off All Might. And with a bunch of his own original inspiration." Shoto ponders this information, equal parts confused and intrigued. After a few moments, he raises an eyebrow and comments, "And you know all this because?" "You've got me, Todoroki." He raises his hands in mock surrender. "I'm 110% Gecko fanboy trash. I draw him, I write self-insert fanfic, and I study him like a stalker." Creepy, right? But that still doesn't explain how you know the exact details of how his costume came to be. "Well, I did meet him once, maybe. Maybe I was standing in a Denny's parking lot and maybe I saw him crawl out of a dumpster like the girl from The Ring. Maybe." The silence that stretches between them is almost deafening. Shoto's just not sure how to reply, but the boy before him has a look in his eye that suggests he'd rather be shot dead on the spot than continue this conversation. Now Shoto's never been good at social cues, socializing, or even being around people, but he can sympathize with whatever complicated emotions are driving this weird kid to long for the sweet release of death. So, he heaves a sigh and says, "Won't think too much about what you just said, but I can certainly respect someone who sees Endeavor for what he is. So, I think I should introduce myself." He extends a hand, "Shoto Todoroki, of the Hero Course. It's been very entertaining to meet you." Strangely enough, the boy stares at Shoto's hand like he just offered him a rabid badger. Glancing up to meet Shoto's eyes, he gives a vague smile and starts extending his hand. Shoto recognizes the familiar insecurity with contact at the same time his hand almost touches Shoto's. Izuku-. "If you aren't comfortable with touch, you don't need to shake it," Shoto says, which makes the boy look up at him in surprise. "Just your name is fine." Gratitude glimmers in the boy's eyes and his smile grows more genuine as he withdraws his hand. Shoto lets his own fall to his side. "Izuku Midoriya, Gen Ed. I never thought I'd be hitting it off with a Hero Course student. I almost knocked flat on there but I guess shit happens, here?" "Yeah." Gesturing back towards the cafeteria with a lopsided smile, Izuku meets Shoto's eyes and says, "Me and a few of my friends are gonna sit together in the cafeteria. Wanna come with?" "A few of them are from the Hero Course and a few are from General. They're all cool as hell though. Maybe they'd be a little more sane and reasonable than me." For a second, Shoto considers leaving to find a quieter spot. Though, he quickly changes his mind when the thought occurs to him that he's being invited to sit with someone that is actually wanted. The notion warms his heart ever so slightly and he nods. "Sure. I think that would be nice." With a cheerful smile only vaguely dimmed by dead, tired eyes, Izuku turns and leads Shoto back into the chaos of the cafeteria, weaving his way through the sea of students. As he does, Shoto notices how acutely aware Izuku is of every movement close to him, ducking away whenever a student nearly bumps him, tucking his shoulders inward to make himself smaller, and Shoto feels a pang of familiarity again. "That's how I get on particularly bad days." The notion sparks a curious yet apprehensive jolt in his chest, and he feels an odd surge of sympathy for his entertaining new acquaintance. Of course, he says nothing about it. He knows how much he values his own privacy, and he certainly doesn't want to make Izuku uncomfortable, so he keeps his mouth shut. That is, until Izuku stops in front of a table. At that table are an odd assortment of General Course and Hero Course students. Kirishima, Kaminari, Ashido and Zero are classmates of his, but the other two are complete strangers. Kirishima notices Shoto and Izuku first, widening his crimson eyes and grinning. Midoriya, hey. And Todoroki? Izuku nods. Yeah, I almost knocked him down by accident on the way here, so now he's stuck with me. With us, I guess. The brown-haired girl raises a hand at the same time Ashido does and waves energetically. Heya, Todoroki. Hello. Kaminari gives Shoto a smile and raises his hand slightly in greeting. You gonna sit down, man? There's room for all of us, you know. As he tentatively works his way around to find a spot next to the purple-haired boy with the same dead eyes as Izuku, Shoto realizes just how far he's out of his depth. This table is full of chatterboxes, people who form bonds with each other easily and who can navigate social situations like the backs of their hands. Compared to them, Shoto is. If you don't want to talk to them, you don't have to, the purple-haired boy says to him, not a fan of social shit either. God, what a mood. Izuku shoots back at them from the other side of the table. The boy narrows his eyes and mutters, you don't get to talk. You mutter enough to make up for us all. Shinsu, stop bullying me. After a moment, Izuku's eyes glimmer with vague surprise and he meets Shoto's eyes. Oh, right, I never introduced you to these losers from the general course. Rude. Shinsu whispers, taking a sip of his drink. Izuku shoots him a look of mock disdain. Then, he shakes himself and gestures to Shinsu, this edgy BS here is Hitoshi Shinsu, and he's in gen with me. And she, Izuku gestures vaguely to the brown-haired girl sitting smack dab between Zero and Ashido, is Natsuki Jiu. She's also in general. Beside Izuku, Kirishima flashes Shoto another blinding grin. Me and Midoriya go way back. That's how we all ended up hanging out like brothers. Izuku nods, starting to branch off into a conversation with Kirishima about the hero student's next class. The class supposedly taught by All Might. Shoto's fingertips tingle in anticipation as he thinks about it. I'll be careful not to use my left side. Hey Todoroki, are you really Endeavor's kid? Comes a shout that pulls Shoto harshly back into reality. Natsuki's leaning out across the table to see past Ashido and Shinsu. Her eyes glitter with excitement and admiration, but all it does is send a heavy block of ice straight into his gut. Lips pursed, he raises his drink to his mouth and thinks of how to respond. Though before he can, Izuku's already beaten him to it. I know, I was shook too, but Todoroki here is so much more bearable than Endeavor, not gonna lie. Kaminari blinks. But Endeavor's pretty cool dash. I mean, if you're into egotistical, hot-headed pieces of shit who have permanent resting beach face, then Endeavor's your guy. The fucker's about as personable as a rabid ferret with an attitude problem. Shoto chokes on his drink. Beside him, Shinsu tries to hide a wheeze in the sleeve of his uniform. Kirishima's cheeks are puffed up and his cheeks flush cherry red as he attempts not to laugh. The rest of them, save for Izuku, who looks as happy as a cat with a canary, look at Izuku in shock. Jesus Christ Midoriya, let the man live. Zero coughs. Izuku only smirks more. I'll let him live when he gets knocked down a few pegs. Though, if you look at the guy's popularity ratings, he's doing just a swell job of knocking himself down already. The table explodes in laughter, and Shoto for once finds himself actually happy. Izuku, however, leans forward across the table and grins at Shoto mischievously. How badly do you want to see Endeavor's head doused in ice water again? Shoto almost misses his whisper amongst the laughing of the other students at the table, but whispers back a reply, more than anything. Consider it done, my friend. Izuku says, his grin widening. Shoto desperately wants to ask Izuku what the hell he means by that, but chooses not to ask. After all, Kirishima's taking his own jab at Endeavor and Shoto certainly doesn't want to miss out on hearing his classmate roast his father within an inch of his life. When the end of the day comes, Izuku finds himself waiting for Aizuru at the gates. Which strikes him as odd, yet again. He's spent years upon years trying his hardest to escape school grounds as quickly and stealthily as possible, and now? Now he's waiting for his friend to finish up in class and walk with him to the train station. A real, actual friend. Someone who has his back and wouldn't do a thing to hurt him. His first friend, seeing as Bakugo was never really his friend at all as far as Izuku's concerned. "Sorry I'm late, Midoriya." Comes the familiar, cheery call. Izuku glances up to see his friend jogging towards him, eyes gleaming with excitement. That, as well, is something Izuku still isn't used to, being regarded with joy rather than contempt or disdain. "It's nice." Izuku shakes his head. "It's all right. I'm not in a rush, anyhow." Eijiro heaves a relieved sigh. "Oh, thank God. I was freaking out wondering if I was keeping you back. You don't need to worry about it. It's nothing worth worrying about." Eijiro blinks at him like he wants to say something more, but he just shrugs and smiles. "I just worry anyway, dude. It's how I am." A moment passes where Izuku ponders Eijiro's words. Though, he's interrupted by Eijiro suddenly letting out a heavy groan. "Hell, tonight's gonna be a nightmare." "Why?" "Present MIC assigned us some extra work for English, and I need every extra mark I can get since I SCK at schoolwork. So I'm probably gonna be crying over English at like 1 in the morning, he mutters, rubbing at his eyes. For a few moments, Izuku finds a few different thought processes warring about in his mind. On one hand, he finds himself, surprisingly, wanting to invite Eijiro over to his house to study and potentially spend the night. On the other, his instincts are yelling at him to wish Eijiro good luck and go home so he can get ready for yet another sleepless night of vigilante work. Yet another is suggesting he offer to help Eijiro tomorrow morning, in the small time frame between their arrival at school and the beginning of class. As they start walking towards the train station, Izuku heaves an exasperated sigh. "DM in my stupid effing hero complex." "Hey," Izuku starts, meeting Eijiro's eyes, "you know, you can come to my place tonight if you want. I can, help you with your homework. Only if you want to, though. If you don't, that's O-. Dude, seriously? I'd totally be down with that." Eijiro exclaims before Izuku can finish, eyes shining. His enthusiastic reaction catches Izuku off guard. Dazed momentarily by Eijiro's response, Izuku stammers out a reply, "Oh, really? I wasn't really expecting that. I'm always super hyped to hang out with friends, man. Oh man, this is gonna be great. Before we make any plans to do dumb shit, we need to finish the homework." As much as it kills my will to live to say it, he jokes back with a crooked smile. Eijiro snorts. "Yeah, I didn't forget. I'm just super excited." Izuku nods. Not knowing what else to say after that, he lets a bit of his fanboy side surface and gives Eijiro a curious look. "So, what's it like being taught by All Might?" That's definitely the right thing to say, because his friend's face lights up with pupper-like excitement. As they head for the train station, Izuku finds himself thinking that maybe having his friend over would be a nice change of pace. "So nobody's seen him at all tonight?" Shouter asks over the phone, bathed in the shadows of an alley in Hosu. On the other end of the line, Naomasa heaves a sigh. "No. Once in a while Gecko disappears and doesn't show up, but it's certainly an odd occurrence. He's out almost every single night, and isn't discreet about it at all." Shouter gives a non-committal hum. He's a teenager, so school's probably giving him a rough time. Or maybe he's trying to balance his life out a bit. Of course, the second option is a bit of a stretch, seeing as responsible really isn't Gecko's forte. But either way, it's not a bad idea to consider all potential reasons for Gecko's absence. "Shame I won't get to fight the little BSTRD again," Shouter says with a hint of amusement. "I was looking forward to seeing our resident enigma in action once more. I hope this won't impact your will to bring him into custody." Naomasa says, a warning in his tone. Shouto snorts. "Of course not. When I say I'll do a job, I absolutely will do that job." "Glad to hear it. I'll leave you to your work, then. If you do manage to see Gecko, please call me immediately." "Sure. Good luck to you on your end," Shouter says, hanging up immediately afterward. Alone with his thoughts once more, Shouter takes a deep breath and starts navigating his way through the maze of alleys crisscrossing Hosu. As he does, he finds himself remembering the odd Quirkless student he'd seen earlier that day. A quick chat with Kiyoma had given him the student's name and class number, but that hadn't told him nearly as much as the confrontation he'd witnessed between Izuku Midoriya and the other student. The way Izuku had stood his ground, eyes never once drifting from his classmate's gaze. Their body language had been even stranger, with Izuku initially looking like he wanted to cower and run, but gradually morphing into stoic intimidation. The other student had towered over Izuku, growling in a voice too low for Shouter to hear, but Izuku just smiled and said something back. Shouter only emerged from the blind spot he'd been utilizing when it looked as though the bigger student was going to attack. But the look in Izuku's eyes the moment the other student was about to attack was something he'd never seen before in all his years of hero work. Sure, he'd seen it on villains and some over-aggressive heroes, but never on a child's face. The taller student had the visage of a bull. Izuku had the eyes of a viper. A shiver runs down Shouter's spine. What's he gonna do? Kill me? Shouter's definitely going to keep an eye on that one. Regardless of whether or not this student really is Gecko, a student who looks like that is not one that should be left unchecked. On the way home, Izuku ends up stopping a bullying incident behind his old middle school. It hadn't been anything as serious as what he'd endured, but bullying was bullying and Izuku hated it. Aijuru said he'd be at Izuku's house around 10 p.m. so Izuku had donned his vigilante gear and decided to wander the neighborhood to look for small incidents until 9. He'd sent his mother a text telling her he was taking a walk to get junk food, and gone out alone. It was while he was running along rooftops towards the convenience store that he saw 3 middle schoolers harassing a boy and a girl. Izuku'd swung himself down from the roof of the nearest house and landed a crushing roundhouse kick on the face of the most aggressive-looking boy. The other 2 ended up clearing out very quickly after that, their injured ringleader stumbling after them with a hand held to his blooded nose. Behind him, the boy and girl pressed themselves flat against the wall in fear. Knowing full well that they are absolutely terrified, if Izuku had been in their situation a year ago, he probably would have screamed. Izuku lets out an exaggerated sigh. Look at them run, hey? Like chickens on steroids, he jokes, turning around to face them. Still, they watch him apprehensively. Izuku backs up to give them space and gives them 2 thumbs up. Well, I'm just your friendly neighborhood Deadpool knockoff, here to kick butt and take names because bullies are about as useful as a rubber doorknob. Right? The pair exchange a confused look, and Izuku takes another breath. If I'm freaking you out, please, by all means run screaming into the distance. I don't take offense at all. I'll just cry a little bit when nobody sees me, but I'm dead inside, so really, no harm done. Ah. You, okay? The boy asks, fluorescent pink eyes glittering with confusion. Hands on his hips, Izuku grins behind his mask and exclaims, nope. But that's nothing new and therefore, nothing to worry about. A silence heavy as lead hangs between them. Izuku swings his hands in front of him with a deep breath through his teeth. So, are we done here? Have you got any other inconveniences you need me to kick into orbit? Help you cross the street? Let the spider outside? What is it? What is the issue? The girl holds up her hands and shakes her head. Nothing. Just, thank you. You probably scared them away for a while. And that means a lot to both of us. No problem at all. Izuku says, shooting them finger guns and feeling a spark of warmth in his chest. Next time they bug you and I'm not around, punch the dude in the throat. If you hit hard enough, you can drop them on the spot. The pair blinks at him in what could be confusion, but Izuku doesn't feel like dragging the awkward interaction on any longer. Instead, he spins around and jogs away, breaking into a run when he approaches the chain-link fence around the school and slinking over it with the speed and grace of a cat. Which is a surprise to Izuku, because his fence-climbing track record hasn't exactly been fantastic while being watched. Well, at least this time around he didn't embarrass himself. Hopefully fortune smiles on him again in the future, should a fence and an audience be involved. By the time he leaves the kid's line of sight, he slows to a walk and checks the time. Once he confirms that it's around 9 o'clock, he takes a breath and starts heading in the direction of the convenience store. He might as well slip into the store and grab some snacks for himself and Ajuru's study session/sleepover while he's out and about. As he starts looking for a suitable back alley in which he can change into street clothes, he becomes increasingly aware of a vague presence. He's not sure whether it's malicious or benign, but there's definitely someone tailing him. Still, Izuku doesn't let on that he knows. For a while, he wanders aimlessly around with his senses straining to pick up any information on who's following him. It takes close to 10 minutes, but he finally hears it, the sound of someone's foot knocking into a pebble behind him. Just around the last corner, no doubt. He makes his move. Before the person can emerge from around the corner, Izuku breaks into a dead sprint towards the noise. Feet making scarcely more than a whisper as they touch the ground, Izuku approaches the corner. He sees the shape of a person a good foot or so taller than himself and lowers himself below their striking height, yanking one of his rods from its holster and smashing it into the sides of the follower's knees. The person hisses in surprise, stumbling enough to reveal an opening. Izuku's free hand shoots up, the heel of his palm slamming into the stranger's throat and giving him the chance he needs to knock the person down and pin them to the ground. Adrenaline coursing through his blood and making his hands tingle with anticipation, Izuku narrows his eyes at the back of the man's head. You've got the brain power of an amoeba if you thought following me around was a good idea. What the shit did you think was gonna happen? I'd say, hey, how's it going, dude? Oh man, wanna go hang out and play some Portal 2? Newsflash, a-hole, I'm socially awkward and too goddamn poor to afford any decent games. Izuku says in a withering voice. The young man below him wheezes from the hit he'd taken before turning his head to look at Izuku with one red eye. Greasy silver-blue hair falls over his face and shrouds his cracked, dry skin in such a way that Izuku almost doesn't notice. That's when Izuku feels it, the same sort of vibe that surrounds villains like a cloud of noxious gas. A creepy grin spreads across the young man's face. Wow, it's really the infamous Gecko. You certainly know your way around a fight, heh? And you like video games. I feel we'll get along great, you and me. He says in a voice like ice grating over stone. Izuku's mouth curves into a sheet-eating grin behind his mask. Oh yeah, Minecraft and Candy Crush are my favorites. Sometimes I even go really obscure and play Roblox and Fortnite. Below him, the man stiffens and his eye twitches in obvious irritation. Impish satisfaction shoots through Izuku, and he has to restrain himself from going further. After all, the man looks a lot like he's wanting to speak. As physically agonizing as that was to hear, I came here to talk to you about something. Something very important. No, I'm not joining your sniper clan. Would you? The man snarls, whipping around like an eel and yanking his hands out of Izuku's grip to deck him in the jaw. Shut up and listen. The two spring apart, Izuku pressing a hand to his jaw and the man giving him a look full of contempt. A broken tooth rattles around in Izuku's mouth, blood filling his mouth from a laceration on his tongue. Lifting up the bottom of his mask just enough to spit out the tooth, Izuku glances back at the villain. Is that what happens when you push an angry COD player over the edge? You get decked in the mouth? That's a little overdramatic, isn't it? Does your butt ever get jealous of the sheer amount of sheet that comes from your mouth? The villain hisses, which makes Izuku grin again. Wow, I use that one a lot. Okay, my turn, so how about this? You couldn't pour water out of a boot with the instructions on the heel. I'm here to recruit you for our cause, the man grits out, definitely trying not to rip Izuku's head off. Laughing, Izuku replies, thought I made it pretty clear that I'd rather be thrown in a vat of formaldehyde. You spawned into existence as Gecko right around the time All Might returned. I have a feeling that's no coincidence. You sound like a really shitty conspiracy theorist, Greaseman. Where'd you pull that one out of? Your butt. Izuku replies, not liking where the man's going with his line of questioning. Not because he's worried he'll figure out who Izuku is or that he'll convince him to become a villain, but rather because he's running dangerously close to the deadline he set for himself. Adding a lengthy conversation to that will absolutely guarantee Izuku returning home late. All I want you to know is that we understand what you've been through. We've all been slighted by All Might in some way, and if you want to turn that resentment into action, we'll welcome you into our ranks, he says, red eyes piercing despite his childish personality. Izuku shrugs in an exaggerated manner. Anyways, I have shit to do and people to annoy. Have fun playing out your video game fantasies through. He reaches forward to jokingly shake the man's hand. It's been absolutely abysmal to meet Y-. In the process of slipping a tiny tracker into the man's hoodie sleeve, all 5 of his fingers touch Izuku's hand. Immediately, he recoils. Gripping at his wrist and biting his lip hard enough to draw blood, Izuku watches as his hand starts to slowly decay. Flesh crumbles, revealing muscle and ligaments, then bone, and his quirk struggles to combat whatever horrible thing the villain's quirk has done. His crumbling hand regenerates momentarily before melting away again in an agonizing cycle of decay and regeneration. Izuku has to fight to keep from crying out, stumbling backwards as his eyes water. In front of him, the villain gives him a sadistic grin. If you decide to be less of a prick, we'll welcome you. Until then, have fun with that. Before Izuku can do anything, a dark portal materializes behind the man. Raising his hand in farewell, he backs into the portal and vanishes. Izuku steps back to lean against the wall and yanks his mask off his head. F dash, F dash, F dash, F dash, goddamn effing shit dash, he hisses through clenched teeth. A few minutes pass where Izuku waits in the hopes that his quirk will eventually overcome the villains, but it seems to be at a stalemate. His fingers are almost completely skeletonized, stark white against the crimson blood and pulsing muscle trying to heal itself. Slowly, Izuku comes to a realization. I'll have to cut it off so it can heal without getting destroyed constantly. Liking his lips against the nausea that wrenches at his gut, Izuku pulls a knife from one of his pouches. He turns around to press his hand against the wall, the same one he'd just regrown the night before. In one smooth motion, he rests the blade against his wrist and shoves his entire weight against it. There's a loud crack and a muffled whimper, and the damaged hand drops to the ground. Izuku's vision swims with pain as he turns to lean against the wall again, hoping the waves of agony that radiate up his arm will cease. It'll be back to normal in about 20 minutes. I just need to hold out until then. A quick glance at his phone lets him know, however, that he's definitely going to be later than his 9:30 p.m. deadline, regardless of whether or not he stops by the convenience store. With a shaky sigh, Izuku pulls the shredded glove off his severed hand, wraps the stump of his arm in it, and navigates the alleys on his way home. It takes some time, but Izuku finally sees his apartment complex at about 9. After that, a quick jog to the backside of the building and a few well-used footholds in the old building bring him up to his bedroom window. By the time he reaches up to slide his window open, the sun's long set and the streetlights cast a harsh glow over the neighborhood, which is good. Less chance of being seen during his climb. His ascent is a bit hindered this time around, seeing as his hand's slowly regrowing itself, but sliding the window open is easy. Once that's done, Izuku pops out the screen and silently clambers inside. As soon as the screen's back in place and the window is securely shut, Izuku lets out a heavy sigh and pulls his mask off his head. He turns around. Eijiro is sitting on the floor next to his bed, frozen mid-bite with a handful of potato chips. His schoolwork is spread around in front of him, eyes as wide as dinner plates. A deafening silence hangs between them. Izuku swallows. Or, F-it. The silence between Izuku and Eijiro hangs heavy as a rain-drenched blanket, and Eijiro's not sure what to say. He'd just come over a bit early, hoping to see Izuku a bit earlier than he'd anticipated. He absolutely did not count on seeing his friend clamber through his bedroom window, several stories up, clad in a green jumpsuit with one hand completely cut off. Okay, this wasn't how I imagined this reveal thing going, but here we are, I guess. Holy food, Eijiro doesn't get to finish at all, because Izuku's crossed the room faster than he can blink and slamming a hand over his mouth. In no time at all, the shorter boys manage to wrestle Eijiro to the ground and hold him there, where green eyes glittering with nerves and hostility burn into his own. If you make so much as a peep, God help me, I'll punch you so hard, you'll clip through the ground like a Bethesda character model. Izuku hisses. Eijiro shakes his head furiously, mumbling against Izuku's one remaining hand. Izuku's eyes flare. I mean it. Not even Todd Howard himself will be able to miraculously save you when I'm through with you. For a while, Izuku glares at Eijiro and the redhead just returns it with a wide-eyed look of his own. The tension between them could be cut with a knife, but something in Eijiro's eyes must be reassuring, because Izuku takes a deep breath, lets it out slowly through his nose, and mutters, "I'm going to change before my mom comes in and sees me in this green unitard, and you'd better be quiet as F-." Unable to really do anything else, Eijiro nods. Slowly, Izuku removes his hand from Eijiro's mouth and shuffles back so he's no longer pinning him to the floor. Eijiro sits up just as slowly. Another long pause drags on between them. "I knew it." Izuku's eyes spark with alarm. "What the F? How could you know?" "You're a really crummy liar, dude. Also, I'm just that good at knowing what's up." The last part is said with a grin and hint of amusement, but Izuku just squints at Eijiro and scrutinizes him further. Izuku jabs a finger at him. "Whatever, we'll talk about this later. Just keep watch on the door or something. The last thing I need is my mom realizing that her only son is a thief, a liar, and a BSTD. You're not Kirishima. I've stolen sheet, I've lied about sheet, and I have disturbed the sheet. Let me suffer through my own questionable choices without any form of validation. Please." Eijiro shuts his mouth. If that's how Izuku wants to be, then Eijiro won't do anything to upset him, especially not now, considering Izuku's threat to Bethesda him into oblivion. Of course he's certain Izuku wouldn't go through with it, but he'd rather not push his luck. It's at this point that Eijiro finally remembers the state of Izuku's bloody stump hand. With a sharp gasp of horror, he starts crawling towards Izuku. "Dude, we've got a deal wi-." A fiberglass rod whips around with a low whistle, cold metal prongs pressed against Eijiro's throat. He freezes. The anxiety and nerves in Izuku's eyes now outweigh the hostility, but the way he's glaring is enough to make Eijiro take the situation very seriously. "Don't make another move or I'll make it feel like Zeus himself is unleashing his fury on you. If you knock me out, you're gonna have a hell of a time explaining it away to your mom. You know that, right?" Eijiro whispers back before he can think better of it. Wincing at his own boldness, Eijiro waits for the shock that never comes. Instead, the rod retracts back into itself and Izuku groans. "God fucking damn it, why do you have to logic me out of my last-ditch threat dash?" With a shaky exhale, Eijiro sits back on his knees. "Look, I just want you to chill. Okay? Let's just take it down a notch and get you out of your costume and deal with that hand." "You were gonna say fursuit." "I'd never eat my entire left shoe, Kirishima, I know you were thinking it. I'm not eating your name brand, pristine Air Jordans. They aren't F Jordans. Do I look like I have the money to be spending on some expensive butt sneakers? As it is, I have to crawl under the dryer to look for change for a pack of ramen." Izuku hisses, reaching up to tangle his fingers in his hair. "You're trying to change the subject so I don't talk about your hand, just let me help My hand's completely fine. Midoriya, it's cut right the hell off. Izuku shushes, slapping his hand over Eijiro's mouth as Inko's voice comes from another room. "Are you all right in there, Kirishima?" she calls softly as the sound of her feet on the floor begins growing nearer. Izuku lets out a panicked wheeze, and Eijiro immediately grabs Izuku by the front of his suit and starts shoving him under the bed. Thankfully, Izuku doesn't struggle and instead scoots under the bed as fast as he can, too. "It's okay. I stubbed my toe and knocked some stuff on the floor." "Oh dear," Inko says from outside the door, "are you okay?" In a high-pitched voice, Eijiro gives Izuku one last shove and replies, "Fine." Inko cracks open the door just as Eijiro assumes what he hopes is a casual position against the bed. Hopefully, his body blocks Inko's view of the blood Izuku left on the floor. She blinks at him owlishly. "Are you sure you're alright, dear?" Eijiro nods with a grin. "Yup. I'm just crazy clumsy." "Alright, then. Let me know if you need anything." Inko sighs before closing the door and leaving. The two boys hold their breath right up until they're sure they can hear Inko puttering around in the kitchen, after which Izuku rolls out from under the bed and stays lying on the floor. With a groan, he presses his remaining hand to his eyes and mutters, "God, why does this stuff happen to me?" "Hey, we managed to prevent your mom from finding out, right?" "That's good, at least," Eijiro murmurs quietly in response. Izuku heaves a dramatic sigh, letting his hands drop against the floor. "I want to die." "Don't talk like that. Even if I try, I won't be able to die. Let me be self-deprecating." "Still, it's bad for your mental health." My mental health has been F6 ways from Sunday already, Kirishima. There's nothing more I can do to fit up even more. Let me die. With a long-suffering sigh, Eijiro tenses his hands in front of his face and mumbles, "Okay, fine. Just get out of the suit and we'll argue after we're in the clear." "Fine." Izuku mutters back, rising to his feet and awkwardly shucking his jumpsuit off. He wedges it into the back of his closet under some boxes, and it's then that Eijiro furrows his brow in confusion. "How the heck are we gonna clean up all this blood?" Without turning around, Izuku replies, "It evaporates completely within 5 minutes. Eijiro replies with confidence, although he honestly has no idea how to react to this information. Once Izuku's changed into normal clothes, he heaves a sigh and holds up his stump hand. Although by now, it's no longer a stump hand. In its place is a tiny hand gradually increasing in size before Eijiro's eyes. Choking back a laugh, Eijiro tries not to say anything. Izuku, however, points at him with his tiny hand and hisses, "One word about the baby hand and I'll cut off my other hand and slap you with it." "I'm sorry, I just isn't okay." Eijiro snorts into his hand, and Izuku glares at him like he's honestly considering following through with his threat. Instead, he just rubs at his temples with both hands and grumbles, "I'm going to climb back outside now and walk in through the front door. Please, for the love of everything on God's green earth, act like I haven't seen you yet." "How are you gonna explain away your—" Eijiro takes a deep breath to compose himself, "teeny hand?" Izuku gestures wildly with his hands, rolling his eyes and mocking Eijiro's laughter. "Oh, I'm gonna tell my mother it's a KFC spork, obviously. Can you not show me a little bit of sympathy? I messed up by trying to sarcastically shake some psychopath's hand and his quirk melted my hand like Thanos snapped his fingers at it. I'm a victim here." It seems like the confrontation got a little out of hand, Eijiro wheezes. Izuku flips him off with his baby hand. Eijiro hacks into his hands in an attempt to not laugh aloud, but Izuku seems to have had enough and starts crawling out the window. Once he slides it shut, Izuku continues to flip Eijiro off until he's too low to reach the window. By the time Eijiro composes himself and starts tidying up the mess they'd made during their struggle, the sound of the front door opening reaches his ears. Izuku calls out an "I'm home," and Inko immediately responds with a cheerful voice, "Oh, Izuku. One of your friends came over, Kirishima is his name. He's in your room right now." "Oh, really? He wasn't supposed to come until later," he replies, and Eijiro gets the sense that he's being targeted directly by that sentence, "but thanks." That's immediately followed by the sound of Izuku approaching, and he blinks at Eijiro as though surprised. "Hey, Kirishima." "Hey, dude. What took you so long?" "Oh, nothing too important," he replies with a sigh, closing the door behind him. He drops his backpack on the floor next to the door, crosses the room, then flops down on his bed. Face smushed against the blankets, he mumbles something that's too muffled for Eijiro to hear. "Dude, I can't hear you with your face squished like that." Izuku tilts his head just enough for his voice to be clearly heard. "I said, thank you for the convincing welcome. I know you're absolutely thrilled to see me." "I am," Eijiro exclaims in response, "What made you think I wasn't?" Shrugging, Izuku rolls over on his back where he just stares at the ceiling in silence for a time. Not wanting to push him more than he already has, Eijiro just relaxes back into the side of Izuku's bed and returns to reading over his notes from school. After a while, a soft voice comes from beside his head, making him jump, "You were right about your messy writing." Eijiro glances sideways to see Izuku leaning over the edge of the bed, looking at the papers spread across the floor. One eyebrow is pared in interest and his head is tilted to the side ever so slightly. Aizuru shrugs with a sigh. I know, it's pretty ugly, isn't it? Kinda. But mine's not much better, so this is a kind of pot, meat kettle situation. So I can't say shit. He just hums in response, reaching back to adjust the ponytail holder, keeping his hair out of his face. Izuku remains where he is and Aizuru lets him try reading over his messy notes for a time. After a while though, Aizuru murmurs. In a low voice, so how'd you sneak your gimped hand past your mom? Raising his hand to show Aizuru its fully healed state, Izuku replies, it takes a bit of time after the initial injury for my body to kick the regen into gear. Once the cells start regenerating though, body parts regrow pretty quick. Oh, Aizuru hums, so what about lacerations and broken bones? Lacerations heal within a minute or so. Broken bones take less than 5 minutes. Minor severed limbs like feet and hands take almost exactly 5 minutes, but if it's a whole leg or my head it'll take longer. Nothing takes more than 10 minutes to heal, though, Izuku explains clinically in a level voice, as though this is nothing concerning and all in a day's work for him. Well, it is, but his bluntness and nonchalant take on serious injuries is still unnerving for Aizuru to hear. Especially the part about his head being severed. Wait, he interrupts, holding up a hand, you've had your head severed. Izuku blinks. If it's a brutal death, I've probably lived it. Or died from it without actually dying, I guess. Vehicle collision? Aizuru asks. That one's common as hell. I get nailed by a fast-moving car grill about once a week. Train accident? I've been vaporized on impact. Once. Incineration? You can thank Endeavor for that one. Impact from a high place? Come on, hit me with something bizarre. Izuku sighs, shifting so his upper body hangs off the edge of the bed. In the back of his mind, Aizuru realizes that this is incredibly morbid and probably TMI, but he can't help asking. The limits of Izuku's regeneration quirk have always been something that vexed his mind when it came to his fascination with Gecko, and now he's able to talk freely with the vigilante himself. Which is more than he'd ever hoped for. Okay, he places his pencil on the floor next to his notes, helicopter blades. Not from an actual helicopter, but I've fought a villain with helicopter blades for hands. Wow. Okay, animal attack. Izuku smirks. I was fighting a villain who could shapeshift and he basically disemboweled me in tiger form once. I caught the guy after I finished regrowing my vital organs, but that was the same day Endeavor annihilated me. Widening his eyes in surprise, Aizuru turns around and meets Izuku's eyes. Geez, Endeavor really tried to kill you? I knew the guy was but I didn't think he'd, kill somebody. With a harsh bark of laughter, Izuku folds his arms across his chest. Well, I didn't either until I met him. What happened? So, Izuku begins, shifting completely off the bed so that he's lying on the floor with his feet hooked over the bed. I just finished regrowing my guts and started chasing this shape-shifting villain down, which was kinda hard since he'd taken the form of a cheetah, but I finally managed to head him off and back him into an abandoned warehouse on the shoreline. So I managed to avoid getting eviscerated again, and knocked him out with a well-thrown rock and a major shock from my rods and used a zip tie to secure him to a post in there. Izuku's smile turns into a scowl then, his green eyes darkening. I was just about to call the cops when Endeavor and some of his sidekicks burst in and started yelling at me to get down on the ground and surrender. I put up my hands and was planning on fake surrendering, but the villain I caught woke up and started to thrash, so I made a move to kick him and knock him out again. Endeavor didn't like that and shot the biggest effing fireball I've ever seen at both of us. And I didn't want him to kill the villain, so I stood there and took it. The villain apparently ended up with 4th-degree burns on one arm and both feet though, and I ended up being set on fire and barely managed to run out of there. I found a place to jump into the ocean, but it's still scared. Aizuru flinches. Not just from the thought of Izuku being hurt in such a way, but also how much agony being incinerated would cause. If Izuku notices Aizuru flinching, he doesn't comment on it. Either way, he stops talking and stares at the ceiling with an unreadable expression. Eventually, Aizuru murmurs, that what made you hate being touched? Well, it was lots of things, he sighs, but that was when it came to a head. I don't know if it's more of a mental thing or if he carbonized some of my nerves, but after that, I couldn't stand being touched. Like, at all. I'm so sorry, dude, Aijuru whispers, feeling his eyes burn and wanting nothing more than to hug his friend. Of course, that'd cause more problems than it would solve, so Aijuru doesn't act on it. Izuku bounces his feet on the bed, jostling Aijuru in the process. Hey, don't get all watery-eyed on my account. I get awkward when people cry 'cause I don't know how to react. Aijuru wipes hastily at his eyes. Sorry. You don't deserve that, man. Nobody does. It's in the past. Nothing I can do about it. I know, I just dash. Hey, Izuku interrupts as he slides the rest of the way off the bed and lies spread-eagle on the floor. Moping over this stuff isn't gonna help me at all. So let's work on your assignment stuff instead of talking about me getting charbroiled by the hookah with an attitude problem. Anyways, I promised Todoroki I'd dump a bucket of water on his ugly mug the next time I see him, so there's nothing to worry about. I'll get my revenge in useless, petty acts that inconvenience him more than anything else. That's the best sort of hell to put someone through. That drags a laugh out of Aijuru, watery but genuine. Izuku gives him a smile, then rolls onto his side and shifts so he can read over the notes spread across the floor. Anyways, I'll do what I can to help you, but you're gonna have to translate your writing for me. Sure, man. Aijuru replies cheerily, picking up his pencil again and launching into the assignment with newfound vigor. It takes a bit of effort, but Aijuru manages to crush down the urge to start rambling about Izuku's second life. After all, he'll have plenty of time to ask about it after this. Izuku's hovering on the cusp of sleep when he hears Aijuru's voice in the dark. Midoriya, you awake? With a grumble, he rolls on his side and shifts closer to the edge of his bed. Aijuru's eyes gleam in the dim moonlight from outside as Izuku mumbles, now. Aijuru shifts from his futon on the floor, propping his head up on his hands. Can I bug you about something? Is it about me being Gecko? Izuku sighs, less of a question and more of a resigned statement. Unfazed, Aijuru nods furiously. Fine. Shoot. So how long have you been Gecko? Dragging a hand over his face and rolling onto his back, he replies, 8 months. What made you want to be a vigilante? Spite. Aijuru snorts. No, really, what was it? Spite, like I said, Izuku sighs, and someone I looked up to told me having a Regan quirk wasn't a good thing to become a hero with, so I should just give up. What? Aijuru hisses, then catches himself and lowers his voice. Who the hell would say that, dude? A Regan quirk is great for hero stuff. Before he can stop himself, Izuku spits back. Well, All Might doesn't think so, effed. All Might said that to you? Izuku sits up and rubs at his eyes. Yeah. But I don't hate him for it. He thought I was just some wannabe loser, and didn't think he'd be kicking me while I was already down. I don't think I'll be able to keep my head if I talk to him, though. I mean, I'd like to talk to him, but I might get, I don't know, emotional? Angry? It's best I don't talk to him until later. Ah, okay. Another silence hangs heavily between them for a time. Just as Izuku's lying back down in bed again, Aijuru whispers, So, can I be your guy on the inside? My what? Okay, so you know how, like, some heroes have a best friend/sidekick who helps them by figuring out exactly what's going on the other side of things and talks to the hero through an earpiece and tells them the best routes and what's going on with other sides and stuff? Can I do that? I don't need a guy on the inside, Kirishima. Well, maybe if you had a guy on the inside, you wouldn't have gotten your hand melted. Izuku sits bolt upright and jabs a finger at Aijuru in the darkness. Look, I had it completely under control. I cut my own hand off because of his godforsaken pizza fingers. Now, for your information, I planted a dash. Izuku breaks off, blinking owlishly. What? Aijuru asks with renewed interest. With a grin, Izuku rolls over and stands up, stepping over Aijuru's form on the floor and sitting down in the chair at his computer desk. He powers on the computer, casting harsh blue light over the room. Izuku hears Eijiro rising and walking up behind him, but stays focused on his computer. After a few purposeful clicks and dives into various folders, Izuku clicks on an application and what looks like Google Maps pops up on the screen. Eijiro lets out a little awestruck whoa as Izuku zooms out and clicks on a few icons framing the map. A pulsing red dot pops up on the screen, in the zone marked as Camino. Dude, is that a dash? I stuck a tracking device on the guy who effed up my hand, since he talked like he was part of a big organization full of villains. I totally forgot about it until now, but it looks like his holdup in Camino Ward. Oh my god, this is so cool. Right? Izuku replies with a smile, leaning back in his chair. Now I can do some more recon stuff and figure out what he's doing. I'll go tomorrow after school. Can I come? No. Eijiro winces, and Izuku feels a stab of guilt. Sighing in resignation, he cards his fingers through his hair and replies, I don't want to risk getting you caught helping me. So I'll go in and relay information to you. You can jot it down somewhere so I have it handy. If you feel up to doing that. Again back to his excited self, Eijiro grins and exclaims, I can do that, man. God, this is gonna be so cool. You have to keep quiet about this, though. Izuku hisses, to which his friend nods furiously. I haven't forgotten your threat to Todd Howard me into oblivion, don't worry. He snickers, before immediately asking, so did you make your own gear and stuff? The track is impressive as hell, dude. At his words, Izuku takes a deep breath and tenses his fingers in front of his face. With a soft groan, he mumbles, you remember how I said I was a liar, a thief, and a bastard? Yeah? That I may have borrowed a lot of things from various hero companies and not given them back. Eijiro stares at him as though that's the most outrageous thing Izuku's done. Forget the numerous brutalities he's gone through, forget willingly looking for villains. Theft is the most heinous crime Izuku's committed. Narrowing his eyes, he grumbles, hey, you'd better not snitch now that you know I've stolen things. I mean, I've done worse. Arson, detonation of explosives, destruction of property, resisting arrest, and assault are worse. And I do those things more than anything else. No, I'm not backing out, Eijiro runs a hand through his hair. I was so sure you made all this stuff. I stole self-healing fabric from Best Jeanist Company for my suit, but I can guarantee I made it myself. I made some things. I just stole other things to make my stuff. Other than that, what made you assume I made it all myself? With a self-conscious smile, the redhead laughs and replies, you're just really smart like that. That, for some odd reason, makes Izuku's face flush in a way it hasn't done in ages. He silently thanks whatever deity is listening for the fact that the room is dark, otherwise Eijiro would have never let him live this down. Regardless, Izuku lowers his face and mutters, thanks, but I'm broke. I can't afford any of this stuff on my own, so even if I wanted to get my stuff legally, I wouldn't be able to afford it. What do you mean by even if I wanted to? You don't feel guilty or anything for stealing stuff? Eijiro asks with a slight tilt of his head. Yes. Izuku exclaims, but finds a stab of untruth digging into his chest. No? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I feel bad for stealing, but this hero society is kinda effed up. So I feel guilty stealing from some hero agencies, but not others? I felt bad stealing from Best Jeanist and Ingenium since they're decent people, but I don't feel bad stealing from Endeavor or spray painting mustaches on billboards with Hawk's face on them. Nodding slowly, Eijiro's brow furrows in a thoughtful expression. I get that. Why Hawks, though? What did he do to you? Nothing, but that's just it. Izuku sighs. He's not really motivated to help people, he just wants to make a world where nobody needs to do anything. I agree, society needs to be changed a bit, but that's not the right way to go about it. What is the right way, then? For a moment, Izuku just meets Eijiro's eyes and considers whether or not to keep this back and forth going. There's nothing but pure innocent curiosity in his eyes, which convinces Izuku that his friend would stay loyal regardless of what he said, to an extent, of course. Which is reassuring, seeing as Izuku's view isn't super radical, but it's still not a conversation for right this instant. With a sigh, Izuku closes the tracking program on his computer, then starts shutting the computer down. It's late. I'll talk about this later, but as it is, Eraserhead's gonna wring your neck for coming to school looking half dead. It feels as though Eijuru's going to press further, but as always, he drops the subject rather than pushing Izuku's boundaries. Which a nice change from the constant shoving and prodding he experienced in middle school. Okay. Sorry to swamp you with all my questions and stuff, I'm really excited. It's alright, Izuku says, casting a smile over his shoulder as he crosses over to his bed. It's kinda nice to be able to share this stuff with someone anyways. Izuku isn't looking at him, but he swears he can feel the happy energy radiating off Eijuru in waves like an excited puppy. This is only further reinforced when he tumbles into the futon and rolls over to face Izuku. So will you consider the guy on the inside thing, at least? Izuku snorts. That's a really dumb name for it. Try something less wordy. Partner. You sound like a crummy cowboy. Okay, ally. I mean, it's okay but kinda overly proper. Izuku laughs, which in turn pulls a laugh from his friend. You're right, Eijuru snickers, how about just bro then? I mean, I call you that already, but... That works. Eijuru laughs quietly in the dark once again, and as Izuku's closing his eyes, he hears his friend murmur, "Night, bro. Night." Izuku replies, a smile spreading across his face that Eijuru can't see. Toshinori's walking down the halls before classes start, searching the sea of students for that same head of wild green hair. So far, he's had no luck at all, and the only student he saw that looked remotely similar to Izuku Midoriya had only brought him face to face with an older student named Shindo. He's just about to give up when he manages to catch sight of him walking through the front gates with Kirishima, Todoroki, and two students Toshinori doesn't recognize. His spirits rise and he starts for the front doors of the school. By the time he gets there, Kirishima and Todoroki have split off and headed for their own class. Now, Izuku walks between the two other students, chattering with them with a smile on his face that just barely reaches his eyes. He's just as pale as he was several days prior, but the bags under his eyes are a little less prominent. That's an improvement, at least. Taking a breath, he speeds up and calls out to him. Young Midoriya. Izuku stops like he's been turned into stone, his head slowly turning to look at Toshinori with the most unreadable look in his eyes. His smile has faded, and his body language tells Toshinori that he's thrown his guard up with the resilience of iron walls. The boy at his side with the purple hair and eyes peeps an eyebrow at Toshinori in surprise, no doubt wondering who he is. Toshinori can't blame him, his skeletal form is definitely something to behold, but Izuku remains completely stone-faced. Apologies for interrupting, Toshinori begins with a sheepish dip of his head, but I'd like to speak with you in the teacher's lounge for a moment. Before Izuku can respond, the boy at his side speaks in a monotone voice incredibly similar to Aizawa's. Sorry, who are you? Oh, I'm a teaching assistant here. I assist in the hero course. I don't see why you'd need to talk to me then, Izuku replies, then adds, I'm not a hero, after all. The last part is said with barely concealed venom that stings like a whip, and Toshinori catches the vaguest glimmer of emotion in Izuku's eyes. What it is, he can't be sure, but he knows by now that Izuku certainly hasn't been able to get past what he said to him on that rooftop so many months ago. With a sigh, Toshinori runs a hand through his hair and says, That's precisely why I need to talk to you, but it's strictly private. The two other students with Izuku look at him curiously, and after a moment of silence, Izuku sighs. Okay. I can't be long though, or present MIC will have my head. Toshinori knows without a doubt that present MIC would never scold a student for being late, outside of a gentle reminder that they should come on time, but it gives more insight into how little Izuku wants to talk with him. Regardless, Toshinori gestures to him to walk at his side. So he doesn't slip away like he did last time. Their walk is spent in dead silence, with Toshinori sparing little sideways glances every once in a while to make sure Izuku isn't sneaking off. Thankfully, he doesn't try anything the whole way there. Once they reach the empty teacher's lounge, Toshinori heaves a sigh. He smiles at Izuku and asks, "Can I offer you a tea or anything, my boy? You don't have to pretend to be friendly." The words catch Toshinori off guard, and he blinks a few times in surprise as the boy remains standing at the door with his arms crossed. Pardon me?" Toshinori stammers, and Izuku sighs. "You made it pretty clear how you felt on the rooftop. You were honest with me, and I was honest when I said I wouldn't tell a soul about your secret. I'm weak, I'm useless in hero society, and I'm a liar, but when I make a promise, I don't break it." "My boy, you're not Dash." "Don't call me that," the student interrupts, closing his eyes. "I've come to terms with the fact that it's impossible for me to be a real hero. I'll end up living without purpose, and dying alone after a bland lifetime where nobody will remember me. I know that, and I really couldn't care less." Toshinori feels guilt lodge itself in his chest, almost as suffocating as the injury that hinders him. Swallowing hard, he quietly murmurs, "Midoriya, you could do so much with your life. You could become a police officer, a detective Dash. But I wouldn't be happy doing that kind of work. Sure, I could be those things, but what's the point when I don't enjoy doing it?" Izuku replies flatly, "Don't give up on yourself, you have so much potential Dash." He's cut off by the sound of Izuku's fist connecting with the wall and echoing loudly around the room. It's not an act of anger, and it wasn't meant to be intimidating. Toshinori recognizes that this was just something to get his attention and keep it. Izuku meets Toshinori's gaze, a fire in his icy green eyes. "You see, that's what I wanted to hear 8 months ago. I don't want to hear it now. Look, I don't hate you, and you're still someone I look up to, but I want you to stay out of my life. You can't crush my dreams and come back a few months later, hoping I'll be completely fine with you. That's not how this sheet works. That's not how anything works." The boy turns and opens the door. "You didn't help me when I needed it. So you don't get to care about me now." The door clicks shut behind Izuku, leaving Toshinori standing in the middle of the room in stunned silence. After a few beats of silence, he presses his hands to his face and slumps back into one of the couches. Guilt threatens to choke him to death, and he can't help but compare the Izuku of several months ago to the one he'd just spoken with. "I did that to him. I tried to help, but I only ended up breaking him down." The door creaks open, making Toshinori jerk his head up in alarm. Aizawa steps in, jabbing a thumb over his shoulder. "Mind telling me why Midoriya was running down the hall like someone set his feet on fire?" Toshinori groans. "I met Midoriya before the school year began and said something to him I can't take back. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it appears I affected his mental state very badly." "What did you say to him?" Aizawa says, and Toshinori notes the small amount of danger that's crept into his tone. "He asked me if he could be a hero with a weak regeneration quirk, and I told him no. He took it badly, but I think my reasoning was fairly solid. Heroes with regenerative quirks tend to be more reckless, and I didn't want a child to Dash." "Wait," Aizawa interrupts with a raised hand, "Midoriya's quirkless. That's what was in his file, and he himself told me he was quirkless." Blinking in confusion, Toshinori pps an eyebrow. "No, I've seen his quirk in effect. He opened a small cut on his finger to show me what it could do when I first met him." Aizawa furrows his brow. "I will look into that. But quirk issues aside, some of the most sought-after heroes are heroes with regenerative quirks since their mortality rate is almost non-existent and they're always incredibly good at what they do. But a child Dash. All those heroes were children once, but their dreams were encouraged and allowed to grow into something great. You took that away from Midoriya. It's no wonder he's upset." Aizawa interjects with a harsh glare. "If we go by your criteria, then that means I shouldn't be a hero either. Not all of us have flashy, all-powerful quirks like yours. Besides, who are you to decide the fate of a child that you hardly even took the time to know?" "No, I never meant to," he trails off, already hating how pathetic he sounds. Running his fingers through his tangled hair, Aizawa heaves a sigh. "I'll attempt to get to the bottom of this quirk nonsense, but you're on your own with this issue you started regarding Midoriya's mental state. You made the mess, now you'd better clean up after it." Toshinori nods slowly. I understand. Good. Now, I'm going to see what's on the boy's mind and you'd better spend some time reconsidering your flawed ideas. I will. Aizawa gives a non-committal grunt, then leaves Toshinori alone with his thoughts once more. As soon as he leaves, Toshinori smacks the heel of his palm against his forehead. How could I have been so dense? What's up? Anything going on yet? No, Kirishima. Izuku sighs into the earpiece he's wearing. A exasperated huff crackles through. God, I thought this was gonna be more, exciting. Or something. This is pretty boring so far, bro. For you, maybe, Izuku says while peering around the corner of the alley he's in, but I'm pretty far from being bored. Just saying. Okay, but you're out in Camino doing cool stuff. I'm sitting at a desk in my bedroom staring at a screen. That's fair, I guess. Am I getting any closer to the villain hideout? There's a pause. The screen says you're about 100 yards from the tracker. Izuku hums thoughtfully. Which direction should I go? Northeast. Great. Thanks, Kirishima. No sweat. Eijiro replies with renewed excitement in his voice, and Izuku can almost picture the way he's probably grinning at the screen. It brings a smile to his own face. He slows to a casual walk, glancing around him carefully as he does. Despite that, though, he moves with a distinct sense of purpose. It's evident to anyone watching that he's searching for something, and that's just what he's going for. If a villain sees me looking for something, they'll probably stop and confront me. And in this getup, at least nobody will know I'm Gecko. For this mission, as Eijiro had called it, Izuku had thrown on a completely different disguise, and with Eijiro's help, he'd managed to make this one look pretty convincing. A messy black wig that hides his right eye from view, a plain white medical mask, black gloves, a plain navy blue hoodie, blue jeans, and a pair of black sneakers he'd picked up from a thrift store earlier in the day. The only thing he hadn't been able to get his hands on were colored contact lenses, and those were more optional than anything else. Kirishima falls silent, then, which Izuku isn't really bothered by. Just for good measure, he removes the earpiece and sticks it in his pocket. He needs to focus on the task at hand without any distractions from here on out. A few minutes later, he runs into just what he's looking for. Or rather, who? You lost, brat? The silver-haired man that Izuku had had his run-in with the day prior leans against the brick wall of a building, red eyes glinting viciously in the fluorescent light from the streets. Izuku swallows in mock anxiety, then rings his fingers together in front of him and stammers out, My name is Akatani Mikumo. I overheard you trying to recruit people for your villain league yesterday? The man stiffens, and Izuku fights back the urge to glare as red eyes shimmer with a fiery threat that burns holes in his skin, melts his flesh, makes him want to punch that look right off his face. No, he can't start things now. He needs to get information on this League of Villains nonsense before it has the chance to do real damage. Maybe take it apart or shake its foundation to its roots, plant seeds of doubt, anything. When, exactly, did you manage to overhear that? The man sneers, lips curling back over cracked lips like a long empty riverbed and making Izuku feel as though he's being watched by a starving hyena. Izuku makes a small show of taking a few steps back and shrinking in on himself. I saw your fight with Gecko. And, I want to join your league. Don't doubt me, please. The man's fading red sneakers scuff on the ground as he stalks nearer with a hunched posture. Acrid breath stinking of junk food hits Izuku like a wall of stone as the man shoves his face in Izuku's and spits. And why would I recruit a sniveling toddler like you? Ignoring the wrath and disdain that threatens to make itself known on his face, Izuku finally meets the villain's eyes levelly and replies, Because I'm a student at UA. Tomura leads. The boy, Akatani, was it? Through the bar's nondescript entrance and into the dim light of the main building. Krogiri stands at the counter contentedly, polishing a particularly nice glass, and some of the villains Tomura had recruited for the invasion sit nonchalantly at the booths and tables. A few of them look over at Tomura and Akatani as they enter, but other than snickering at the kid's diminutive size, they don't spare them a second glance. Tomura gestures impatiently to one of the bar stools for Akatani to sit, then slouches on the next one over. Akatani casts small glances around, looking equal parts apprehensive and curious. Tomura's not exactly sure how to feel about that. There's always the off chance Akatani could be lying about wanting to be a villain. But even if that were true, what could a mere child do in the face of the League? Hell, what could he do in the face of All for One? Kurogiri notices them then, and he makes an almost indecipherable expression that Tomura only picks up on because of how long they've lived together. Kurogiri's confused, as expected. Shigaraki Tomura? Kurogiri starts, setting the glass down on the counter. What is this? Tomura casts a look at Akatani and lets a grin slide across his face. This here is Akatani Mikumo. He might be just what we need to take All Might out of the picture. Tomura gauges the kid's face at his admission, but no traitorous emotions flash across his eyes. If anything, he seems to relax at the mention of All Might being eliminated. He hums quietly, then laces his fingers together and rests his hands on the pristine bar counter. His thumbs shift slowly as he murmurs, "You're planning to kill All Might, then?" Kurogiri glances to Tomura. "That is exactly what we're planning to do." Tomura confirms. "And I feel like you could be just the mole we need." Akatani nods slowly as if thinking it over, but Kurogiri narrows his eyes and says, "How do you know we can trust this hero in training? It's highly likely he's merely here to undermine what we've created." "I know you don't have a reason to trust me," Akatani replies, "so if you don't want me around, that's fine. I'll be on my way and never come back or breathe a word of this place to anyone. But if you want my help, hey dude, you've been quiet for a long time. Are you okay?" Akatani stiffens, his green eyes shooting wide open as his hand darts into his pocket. A moment passes in which Tomura slowly comes to the realization that the unfamiliar voice had been coming through an earpiece or transceiver, and then his immediately jabbing a hand out for the boy. The kid jolts backwards and something slides out of his sleeve. A blade glints in the dim yellow light moments before pain explodes in Tomura's extended hand. The cut runs deep across the palm of his hand, from the base of his pinky to the inside of his wrist, but it's only enough to momentarily shock him into pause. The next second, the bar explodes in shouts and villains race to grab Akatani as he darts for the exit. Kurogiri narrowly misses the boy with a warp gate as he shoots out the door like a cat on fire. Tomura hisses out a curse before running after Akatani with his face contorted in a savage grimace. Bursting out into the dark alley, Tomura catches sight of Akatani sprinting away as fast as he can go, wide green eyes shimmering with anxiety. Tomura snaps his head around to look at the villain nearest to him and hisses, "Kill the little BSE." The villain nods and whistles to a few other villains, and they race after the boy. Once they vanish around the corner, Kurogiri materializes at Tomura's side, and the silver-haired man scratches ruefully at the raw and cracked skin of his neck. Teeth grinding in rage, Tomura snarls, "If they don't kill him, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all." "Calm yourself, Tomura. A child can't possibly evade that number of villains." He whips around, spitting, "I'm never underestimating that little slime again. I won't stop hunting him down until I see his corpse with my own two eyes." Izuku's not sure he's run so fast or hard in his entire life. Not from heroes, not from the police, not from Eraserhead, and certainly not from any other villains. He's not sure why he's so desperate to avoid these particular villains, but maybe it has something to do with Eijiro being involved with this messy side of Izuku's life now. Not that there's any aspect of Izuku's life that isn't messy, but this whole vigilante business is a lot messier than every other part. Or maybe it's just the thought of having to endure Shigaraki's quirk again. At some point in his frenzied, haphazard escape, he jammed the earpiece back in his ear and can now hear Eijiro's voice coming through in worried tones. Izuku can't answer any of his questions, however, partly because he's panting too hard and partly because of the blood roaring in his ears and distorting his friend's voice. Finally, he sees the brilliant glow of Kamino's more heavily populated streets and puts on a last burst of speed. As he explodes into the streets, he ducks his head and tries to melt into the crowd. A few passers-by give him strange looks, but that's the least of Izuku's worries. Not slowing down at all, he glances back over his shoulder to check on the villain's location. And unfortunately, he makes eye contact with one of them, an unassuming-looking man with red hair and fiery orange eyes, and sees the man start walking nonchalantly after him. That's when Izuku slams into someone and is knocked back on his rear. "Oh, I'm sorry about that," a familiar voice says. "Are you all right?" Izuku looks up and directly into the face of Tsukochi Naomasa, who seems surprised but not at all bothered. The man extends a hand to him, but Izuku scrambles back with an awkward laugh and jumps to his feet. "I'm great." Izuku wants to punch himself for the way his voice had jumped a few octaves higher than normal and his utterly unconvincing lie, but there's not much he can do about it now. Tsukochi pps an eyebrow at him, and Izuku belatedly recalls that the detective's quirk lets him know when people are lying. Are you sure? You seem a little distressed. Distressed? Oh, just. Kind of? Yes. I am a little nervous. About things. Izuku lets out a veritable stream of disjointed word vomit in an attempt to not set off Tsukochi's quirk, but this honestly doesn't seem to be working any better than the lie was. Izuku notices Sangza picking his way through the crowd, growing closer with a perplexed look on his face. Casting a nervous glance back over his shoulder to check the location of the villains pursuing him, Izuku listens carefully to what Sangza says. "I questioned a few store managers and civilians, but there's not been any sightings of Gecko in Kamino for over a month. I think it's safe to assume he's not around here at the moment." The irony almost makes Izuku laugh. Tsukochi sighs. "I suppose all we can do for now is observe his next moves and act dash." "Ah, there you are, Akatani," a voice comes from behind Izuku moments before a heavy hand settles on his shoulder. Izuku's skin burns. "Don't touch me. Stop touching me. Get off, get your hand off me." The red-haired villain stands stiflingly close to Izuku, and he tries to keep his emotions off his face. The last thing he wants is to drag other people or surrounding civilians into his mess, but it's incredibly difficult to keep his thoughts collected when there's someone touching him. "Someone is going to attack me. Please don't touch me. I don't want your hand on me. Get off." "Are you the boy's parent?" Tsukochi asks, and Izuku detects a hint of apprehension in his tone. The villain's fingers tighten on Izuku's shoulder. "Oh, no, not at all," he laughs while waving a hand dismissively. "Just an acquaintance. We were out dash." "You know," Tsukochi says softly, and that's definitely a vague threat in the detective's gaze. "My quirk allows me to detect when someone is lying. Would you like to try telling me again what your relation is to this boy?" A moment of silence passes, heavy and stifling, as Izuku picks up the murderous intent hanging in the air. "If I don't do something, this is going to get ugly." Izuku swallows, furrows his brow, and sets his jaw. In one swift motion, he reaches up to grab the villain's arm, lowers himself closer to the ground, and backs into him. He ignores the way his skin crawls at the contact as he uses his weight as leverage and throws the villain over his shoulder. The man's head cracks against the pavement, and Izuku uses the momentary confusion to roll out of the way of Tsukochi and Sangza. As he races away, he glances back over his shoulder and raises a hand in a half-salute half-wave. "You're welcome, detective." He barely catches the way Tsukochi gapes and mouths "Gecko" before Izuku darts down another side street and zigzags through an endless labyrinth of alleys, narrow passages, and small roads. But as Izuku's come to expect, his good luck doesn't hold out. He's just slowing and letting his guard down when there's the sound of something hissing through the air behind him. He tenses and prepares to roll away, but pain explodes in his back, ripping through his body and impaling him on what seems like a 2-foot-long javelin. Izuku can't stop the pained cry that escapes him, and he falls. Before he hits the ground, he rolls onto his side to prevent causing himself more pain and grabs at the end of the javelin sticking through the front of his body. It looks like it caught him through the spleen, and it certainly feels like it as well. His breath comes in ragged gasps, and spasms of pain threaten to make him freeze up, but he manages to wrench the javelin out of him and stagger to his feet. Izuku only gets a few steps before there's a hand grabbing the back of his neck and his legs are knocked out from under him. His face smashes into the sidewalk, and the taste of blood fills Izuku's mouth as one of his front teeth is knocked out. "F. That was a good attempt, Akatani," a woman's voice, "but not good enough." Izuku coughs blood inside his mask and snickers. "Hey, Don't assume I'm sheet outta luck just because dash. His cut off when a hand grabs onto the back of his neck and jerks his head upward. Face tilted towards the sky, he stiffens at the sensation of a blade pressing against his throat. Any last words? Wait, Izuku chokes out, don't kill me until I tell my family about Bofa. A pause. What's Bofa? Izuku wheezes, and barely finishes delivering the punchline before the blade drags across his throat and deals him a lethal wound. Or, what would be a lethal wound if Izuku were anyone else? Regardless though, it still hurts. And pain reverts one back to their basic instincts. Despite knowing he's going to be alright in the end, Izuku's hands shoot up to press against his rent-open throat and his mouth gapes in a wordless shout. The woman drops him to the ground and Izuku curls up on his side as he gasps for air that won't come. Hot blood runs through his fingers, staining his clothes and making his skin sticky, and he has to force his mind to slow down. Play dead. Convince her I'm just some nobody who dies from a simple wound like this. It's like slogging through deep mud with cinderblock shoes, but Izuku manages to gain some semblance of control over his thoughts and slumps limply against the concrete. After giving one last, and hopefully convincing, convulsion, he lets out a wheeze and closes his eyes. The woman nudges him with her foot once, snaps a photo of him with her phone, and mutters a curse about how much blood she got on her hands, but when that's done she leaves quickly and quietly. By now, Izuku's windpipe has healed enough for him to breathe, but blood still oozes from the deep, painful laceration across his throat. He shakily pushes himself up onto his knees, then his feet. Put some distance between me and them. Gotta get somewhere safer. He staggers down the alley, one hand pressed to his throat and the other against the wall of the alley as support. And it's hard. Perhaps the stress and exhaustion is catching up with him and affecting his energy levels. But Izuku's feet drag along the ground and his vision blurs. It feels like his head is filling with cotton, and Izuku knows he's going to be fine, he's fine, my quirk will push me through this, but he wants nothing more than to just lie down and sleep for a week. Akatani, was it? A voice comes from behind Izuku, and he stops. God, I should have just stayed home. Izuku glances back over his shoulder and sees Tsukochi standing about 20 feet behind him with a concerned look on his face. That takes Izuku by surprise. I've caused him so much trouble and he has the audacity to look worried, and he wheezes, Tsukochi. Fear and apprehension passes across the detective's features, and his face contorts in worry. You're Gecko. I'm too tired for this. Tsukochi can't speak for a few moments after delivering that line. Part of him doesn't want to believe that the spirited vigilante he's come to regard with both amusement and frustration is this bloody, exhausted child in front of him. Gecko looks so small. In the flesh. Gecko, or is it Akatani? Coughs, forcing more blood to run from the wound in his throat. Or what's left of it. Finally, Tsukochi makes his numb feet respond to his will and draws closer to Akatani. The boy spins around, green eyes narrowed into slits and leaning heavily on the wall. He says nothing, but Tsukochi can read the look in his eyes and hear his thoughts through it perfectly fine. Stay back. He stops and heaves a defeated sigh. Sansa isn't here, having been occupied with the villain Akatani had practically suplexed into the pavement, and Tsukochi's no fighter, so all he can really do is wait and hope backup comes soon enough. He cards a gloved hand through his hair. Why do you do this? The child before him barks out a laugh that's abruptly cut off by a string of wet coughs. What? Get dealt lethal wounds on a daily basis? Beats me. It's not like I like having my throat slashed. No, that's not. Tsukochi pauses to force the exasperation from his tone. Why do you push yourself like this? Throw your life and safety out the window in favor of what? Adrenaline rushes? Glory? Infamy? A moment pauses where nothing is said and Akatani scarcely breathes. After a few seconds, his gaze lowers to the ground and he huffs. What, are we talking about our feelings now? You go from being a detective to a therapist. Tsukochi doesn't grace that with an answer, instead furrowing his brow and searching Akatani's eyes for any sort of insight into his behavior. But the eye contact must be working somehow, because the boy slowly removes his other hand from his nearly healed throat and says in a completely flat and lifeless voice, It's not like I can be a hero any other way. That's nonsense dash. Akatani's eyes bore into his, fiery green points of light that burn with an indecipherable emotion. Don't talk about things you don't understand. And then, like a phantom, he's gone. There's no sound indicating which way he's gone, no extravagant exit like he'd done with Eraserhead, and no witty banter. Just a trail of sluggishly evaporating blood, a red handprint on the wall, and a myriad of unanswered questions. Midoriya? Midoriya, answer me. Eijiro hisses into the earpiece Izuku had given him earlier that day. At some point during the time he'd heard Izuku's feet slapping on the ground and his ragged breaths crackling over the line, Izuku had shut off the earpiece. It's been around 20 minutes now, and Eijiro's pretty sure that if his friend doesn't answer soon, he's going to jump on the next train to Kamino and look for Izuku himself. Just as he's tossing his laptop across his bed and rising to his feet, his phone buzzes on his nightstand. Eijiro stops. On the screen is a single notification. He wastes no time in immediately diving for his phone and opening his messages. Meme_machine. 201. PLS Letmerest, what's your address? Red Riot 420, Jesus Christ you almost gave me a heart attack dude. Red Riot 420, are you okay? PLS Letmerest, I'm okay IJ. PLS Letmerest, just don't feel like going home. PLS Letmerest, is it okay if I crash at your place? PLS Letmerest, please? Red Riot 420, oh sure, it's totally okay. Red Riot 420, I'll send you a location pin and keep watch for you. PLS Letmerest, thank you. PLS Letmerest, and sorry for being an inconvenience. Eijiro frowns at the screen. Red Riot 420, you're not an inconvenience, man. Red Riot 420, I'm always here for you, okay? PLS Letmerest, okay. Red Riot 420 dropped a location pin. Red Riot 420, see you soon? PLS Letmerest, yeah. Pletmerist is offline. Red Riot 420 is offline. Eijiro keeps his phone in his hand as he pulls on a soft hoodie and steps quietly out the door into the hall. The floor creaks slightly under his feet, but it's not quite enough to wake his parents. And even if it is, it's likely they'll assume he's just going out for a drink of water after a late night of gaming. That was his excuse to hide what he's actually doing, so there's no real risk. It's not long before he gets a message from Izuku, asking if he's in the right place. Eijiro makes his way to the front window and peers out at the dimly lit street. And sure enough, right across the road is Izuku, out of his disguise and shoulders hunched. There's something about his posture that doesn't quite sit right with Eijiro, and he spares no hesitation as he sends his friend an affirmative. He opens the front door as Izuku crosses the street. Hey, man, he says softly, so as not to wake his parents. Welcome to my humble abode. Izuku's quiet for a few moments, then nods. It's then that Eijiro notices the dried blood slowly evaporating from Izuku's neck and chest, clothes, and face. He needs to bite back a hiss and force down the urge to grab Izuku by the shoulders and demand if he's doing okay. Instead, he just takes a deep breath through his nose and whispers, "What? What happened?" As Eijiro shuts the door and watches Izuku kick off his sneakers, the freckled boy murmurs, "Got stabbed. And they slit my throat." Eijiro's stomach twists. Oh, dude. Are you okay? I'll live. I always do. No, that's not what I meant, Eijiro sighs, running a hand through his hair. I mean, how are you feeling? Emotions-wise? Izuku doesn't answer, green eyes glittering with emotions Eijiro can't quite pinpoint. He chooses not to press the issue. Instead, he says, okay. You don't need to talk about it if you don't want to. It's fine. We'll just go to my room, I guess? Still, Izuku doesn't say anything and merely follows Eijiro in silence like a mournful spectre, feet scarcely making a sound on the floor. It's unnerving, really. It makes Eijiro want to turn around and hug him until he feels safe and loved, but again, that would cause more problems than it would solve. When they reach Eijiro's room, he holds the door for his silent companion and watches as Izuku carefully makes his way in. He glances around at the dark room splattered with colorful hero posters, the laptop tossed carelessly across Eijiro's red comforter, and the dirty clothes strewn about the floor. Thankfully, he doesn't say anything about the mess. Or anything at all, really. He just walks in and waits for Aijuru to speak. You can sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the floor, he says with a razor-sharp grin at Izuku, but his friend shakes his head. I don't know if I'll really sleep at all. He subconsciously reaches up and rubs at his throat. So you don't need to bother with that. I'll just play on my phone or something. There's something fragile about Izuku, Aijuru realizes. Of course, he would never describe his friend as fragile in any sense of the word, but it feels as though there's a stifling instability to Izuku right now. Like he's on the verge of breaking down, or snapping, or something. Aijuru can't just let that slide. I'll stay up with you, then, he blurts, and Izuku blinks at him in bewilderment. You don't need to do that, Dash. I want to. Aijuru interrupts. Look, I don't know what exactly happened with you, but you seem a bit shaken up, dude. And I won't just let you be alone. Okay. But Dash. Aijuru shakes his head fiercely. Nope. You're not getting out of this one. A pause. I've got your back, man. I'm always gonna be here for you. Got it? It looks as though Izuku wants to argue, but soon enough, he drops his head in resignation and heaves a sigh. Fine. Finally, Aijuru feels himself deflate a bit and gives Izuku a smile. You can borrow some of my clothes. They might be a bit big on you, but they should work. Sure. When Aijuru finally finds Izuku a set of pajamas that aren't overly gaudy, Izuku moves off into the far corner of the room and changes. As he does, Aijuru starts gathering up the dirty clothes on his floor and sending them flying across the room into his laundry basket. His mind wanders, starting to think of ways he can address the situation without being overbearing or pushy, but it's for naught. Because Izuku takes him by surprise when he quietly says, Kirishima? This is weird, but, can I hold your hand? Aijuru almost chokes on air as he turns around and stares at Izuku with wide eyes. It's not weird at all, don't worry, but, he cards a hand through his hair, are you sure you can handle something like that? With your haphophobia and all? I don't know, but, Izuku's throat bobs, did I really need to do something or I might, he doesn't finish the sentence, but Aijuru's had enough panic attacks of his own to recognize the impending threat of one in his friend's body language. He nods. Okay. We'll try it. Aijuru makes his way over to his bed and sits on it with his legs crossed. Izuku does the same, but he won't look Aijuru in the face, he just watches Aijuru's hands with equal parts apprehension and desperation. And deep inside himself, Aijuru feels something break. He extends his hands towards Izuku, palms up. Just tell me if it's too much. I don't want to, make your fear worse. Okay. Izuku slowly reaches his own hands out towards Aijuru's, fingers trembling. After what seems like an eternity, Izuku's cold fingers finally make contact with Aijuru's palms. A shudder runs through Izuku's body, and the line of his shoulders grows tense. He only maintains contact for a few seconds before he yanks his hands back with a hiss of, "FD. It's okay, man dash." It's not, Izuku snaps, wringing his fingers with a frustrated look on his face before reaching out again. Midoriya dash. He touches Aijuru's hands, and Aijuru now sees how Izuku's entire body trembles violently. He pulls his hands back and speaks in a slightly firmer voice, Midoriya. Izuku's head snaps up, and green eyes glitter with the last vestiges of control being swamped by panic. Aijuru takes a breath, meets his friend's eyes, and murmurs, "Breathe. It's okay." "It's not okay, Kirishima," Izuku says in little more than a wheeze. "No," Aijuru replies, "but it's okay to not be okay. Just breathe, and we'll figure something out." Izuku gives him a jerky nod and closes his eyes. As he works to slow his breathing down, Aijuru's mind races furiously to find some sort of solution to their problem. Problem solving has never really been Aijuru's strong suit, but goddammit it, he's going to try. Finally, as Izuku's shuddering stops and his breathing returns to normal, Aijuru thinks of something. "Midoriya?" Izuku looks up. "This is just me taking a shot in the dark here, but are you okay with your hair being touched?" He laces his fingers together, brow furrowing. I don't know. Would you mind if I tried touching yours? You can say no if you want. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Do it, Izuku says without hesitation. Those hints of desperation are creeping back into his gaze, and Eijiro has to once again force down the urge to reach out and hug him. Eijiro nods stiffly. Okay. Lowering his head, Izuku lets out an anxious breath and shuffles slightly closer to Eijiro. His fingers clutch at the comforter, his body is stiff as stone, and that fragility hasn't left him, but if he wants to try this and if it'll help him, Eijiro's willing to do what Izuku wants. Eijiro takes a breath and wipes his sweaty hands on the blanket under him before shuffling almost close enough to Izuku for their knees to brush. Izuku closes his eyes, and Eijiro raises his right hand. A moment passes where silence hangs heavy and stifling like a noxious gas, and then Eijiro gently brings his hand down to rest on Izuku's head. He puts very little pressure on his hair, just enough that Izuku will probably feel vague warmth on his scalp, but not much else. Kirishima? Why yeah? Should I take my hand off? Izuku swallows thickly. It doesn't burn. What? Eijiro asks confusedly, startling a bit when Izuku leans into his touch with a shaky sigh. When people touch me, it feels like a burn, Izuku starts explaining quietly. My chest starts to get tight and my skin itches and burns, and I get really, really scared. I dissociate sometimes, I'll get dizzy, and I just start completely freaking out. A pause, but this doesn't feel like that. A smile comes unbidden to Eijiro's face. You mean? My hair is okay to touch. Eijiro could cry. He could honestly cry. No, he is crying. Hot, happy tears start rolling down his cheeks and he lets out an ecstatic laugh. He couldn't care less whether or not it wakes his parents up at this point. That's a trivial thing. What's happening here is what's important. Izuku reaches up and presses his palms over his eyes as a shudder runs through him. He's crying too, Eijiro realizes, and musses Izuku's hair a bit. Well, demon, he remarks, looks like we found a loophole we can work with. Below his hand, Izuku's head bobs with a nod. Eijiro brings his other hand up and starts running his fingers through Izuku's green curls. Izuku leans into the touch, hands lowering from his eyes, which are now closed. When Eijiro's eyes finally dry and Izuku's become considerably more relaxed, he starts playing with another idea. Midoriya? Wait here a second. Eijiro swings his legs over the edge of the bed, moving across his room to where numerous hair products lay strewn over the surface of his dresser. After a bit of rummaging, he finds what he's looking for and jumps back on the bed with a muted thump. Izuku looks at what's around his fingers and pps an eyebrow. Kirishima turn around. I wanna do something. Eijiro interjects before he can protest, and Izuku merely gives a heavy sigh and shuffles around until his back is facing him. From there, Eijiro gently reaches up and begins weaving his fingers deftly through green curls. Twisting strands of hair around one another, securing them in place as he works, Eijiro begins making tiny braids throughout the wild mop of hair on Izuku's head. And judging by the contented sigh that escapes Izuku and the way his shoulders relax, he's enjoying this just as much as Eijiro is. The thought brings a smile to Eijiro's face. They continue in silence like this for another hour, right until Eijiro realizes that Izuku has, in fact, fallen asleep sitting up. The world comes back to Izuku in bits and pieces, starting with the unfamiliar texture of the sheets underneath him and the vague scent of a deodorant Izuku's never used. Shortly after he remembers that he is, in fact, in Eijiro's house and apparently sharing a bed with him, he opens his eyes to see a thick wall of pillows in front of his face. He rubs at his eyes and sits up. It's still early in the morning, the sun just barely poking above the horizon and the room still dark, but Izuku can clearly make out the purposefully arranged pillows and blankets between himself and Eijiro. And just beyond that, Eijiro himself. His friend is still deep in sleep, red hair sticking up every which way in an impressive display of bedhead that rivals Izuku's own. Izuku smiles crookedly. He only remembers the numerous tiny braids scattered through his hair when he reaches up to scratch an itch, and then he pauses. Izuku's fingers carefully run across the braid he'd touched as the memories from last night bubble to the forefront of his mind. The exhaustion he'd felt after his encounter with the League of Villains, the panic at almost being discovered by Tsukochi, and then the post-incident realization that the villain he'd been caught by was absolutely in a position to behead him. The only thing stopping her was probably the time frame. Nerves start to act up in his stomach then, and a shudder runs through his body. Izuku's only been beheaded once, and was lucky enough to have his head reattach itself to his body, rather than regrowing a new one completely. It's one of the few things that actually scare him, and he'd like to avoid being beheaded at all costs. There's too many unknowns, and the thought of losing his head, ultimately dying, and regrowing a completely new one in its place is something Izuku really doesn't want to think about. It's about then that Izuku notices the small handful of multicolored elastics sitting on the nightstand next to Eijuru's bed. An idea crosses his mind, and he carefully reaches over his friend's sleeping form to pick up a couple of them before shuffling closer to the wall of pillows Eijuru had seated between them. He likely did it to avoid making me uncomfortable, and twisting the elastics around his fingers. After a moment's hesitation, Izuku reaches out and takes a few strands of red hair in his fingers. It's been a long time since he's braided anything, but the initial haphazard looks of the little braids he twists into Eijuru's hair gradually even out, and within a few minutes, the braids start looking more distinct. Of course though, the moment is only temporary and Izuku is abruptly shaken out of his contented haze when Eijuru's phone alarm goes off. He startles, jumping back a bit as he drops the remaining elastics on the bed. With a deep inhale, Eijuru rolls over, grumbling groggily, and smacks at his phone. It flips off the nightstand and onto the floor, and Eijuru heaves an exasperated sigh and reaches down to shut the alarm off. Izuku watches in amusement as Eijuru sits up and rubs at his eyes, completely unaware of the braids that now litter his hair as wildly as they do in Izuku's. When the redhead finally seems to be fully aware of his surroundings, he glances at Izuku. "Morning. Morning." Izuku forces down the tremor of laughter in his voice, but Eijuru must catch on to something, because he blinks a few times before squinting suspiciously at Izuku. "Did you do something?" he asks. Izuku stares at him as if shocked. "What do you mean?" A moment passes where nothing happens, and then Eijuru slides out of bed, rises to his feet, and picks up his phone. He opens up the front camera and stays silent for a few moments as he takes in his appearance. "Midoriya, what is this?" "What is what?" Eijuru turns around and Izuku snorts at one of the braids that now sticks almost straight up at the front of his head like a unicorn horn. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." "You should thank me," Izuku says as he, too, rises out of bed. "Now you look even more like Crimson Riot." Eijuru opens his mouth as if to protest, but stops and shuts it with a scandalized expression. With an exasperated groan, he jabs a hand out and messes up Izuku's hair even further. As Izuku snickers and ducks away from his hand, Eijuru exclaims, "USCK." His red eyes are alight with humor though, and Izuku merely gives him a cheeky grin. That's rich, coming from the one who started the whole braid thing in the first place. Izuku narrowly dodges the pillow thrown playfully at his head. Izuku and Eijuru arrive very, very late to school, during the lunch hour, in fact, and both of them look tired and slightly bedraggled. Thankfully, though, it seems as though there's a bit of weight lifted from the look in Izuku's eyes, and he looks more like the teenager he should be, less like a jaded elder trapped in the body of a child. It gives Shouter a bit of relief, but the task ahead of him makes him feel a little guilty. Confronting Izuku about his supposed quirklessness is likely going to take that temporary joy away from him. As the two of them enter the school side by side, Shouter notes the numerous haphazard braids that litter both their hair, and the fact that Eijuru actually hasn't styled his hair today. Perhaps he was worried he'd ruin the braids? Well, that's no business of Shouter's. He's here to talk about something a lot less trivial. As they split away from one another, Eijuru breaking into a run towards the hero class wing and Izuku veering off towards where he'd be taking his classes with the other general education students, Shouter makes his move. He rises from the bench he'd been sitting on just inside the lobby and clears his throat loudly enough to stop Izuku in his tracks. The curly-haired student halts and glances guardedly over his shoulder at Shouter. "Midoriya, May I talk to you for a moment? If this is about me and Kirishima being late, it was my fault. I stopped by his house last night and stayed overnight, and then we had to run back to my place to get my uniform. Shouter holds up a hand. I'm not here to talk about that, but you do well to remember that tardiness is not something we appreciate here at UA. Regardless of the cause. Izuku lowers his head, fingers tightening around the straps of his backpack. Seems like people ask to talk to me a lot about things. Can't it wait? No, I don't think it can, Shouter says firmly, and meets the silent defiance in Izuku's eyes with his own stoic intimidation. Finally, the student caves and runs a hand through his braidletted hair. Fine. They don't go far, just into a currently unoccupied classroom where Shouter stares Izuku down. Neither of them speaks for a long time, but eventually Shouter blinks slowly and says, "It's come to my attention that you've been wrongly marked as quirkless. Would you care to explain?" A flicker of insecurity crosses over the student's green eyes, and the silence that follows is deafening. For the longest time, Shouter's sure Izuku's going to stay perfectly silent. What he doesn't expect is for Izuku to bark out a harsh laugh and reply, "Where'd you hear something like that? A conspiracy theory forum online or something?" "No," Shouter says carefully, "I heard it from All Might." The facade of control Izuku's built begins to crumble, and he stands upright from where he'd been leaning against the wall. He seems to be inspecting Shouter's eyes for, well, he's not sure what the boy's looking for, but he's looking for something. After what seems like an eternity, he says in a voice like snake venom, "I see. Why did you lie to the faculty? What sort of quirk, exactly, did he say I have?" "Regeneration." "And how are you going to prove that?" Izuku counters, and Shouter pauses. "Unless it's okay for a teacher to draw blood from a student in a non-training environment, I don't see how you're going to test your theory. I'm also a general education student, so technically, you can't do anything regarding my education or my quirk, if I even have one." Shouter narrows his eyes. "As a member of the staff at UA, it's my responsibility to report any discrepancies in student personal information to Principal Nedzu. Again, how are any of you going to prove that I have a Regen quirk? If you lay a hand on me, you're automatically in the wrong here. I'm just a student. Running late to class, and you've pulled me aside to lecture me, despite me not even being a student in any of your classes, and I end up coming away from this with a wound that may or may not heal. You can't tell me this paints you in a good light in any way," Izuku says flatly, green eyes burning with a challenge that Shouter meets with his own burning glare. "I will be bringing this to Nedzu regardless. His cut off as an ear-splitting alarm rends the air and makes the both of them clap their hands over their ears on instinct. Whatever differences they may have had are set aside as they exchange a look. There's an intruder on campus. Shouter opens his mouth to say something, but the student before him has lowered his hands from his ears and is racing out into the hallway. Shouter makes a grab for the back of his jacket, but students are flooding the halls, rushing to the exits in droves, and congesting the narrow space. Izuku vanishes into the throng before Shouter even gets close, and he silently curses himself for letting this enigma of a student escape. Eijiro finds himself being tossed around by the other students like a ragdoll, and his classmates aren't faring much better. Nearby, Ida and Uraraka let out sharp exclamations, and somewhere to his left, he hears Kaminari let out a string of confused questions. Not knowing what else he should really do, Eijiro pushes his way through until he finds himself wedged up against Ida. The taller student glances over his shoulder at Eijiro, who gives him a grin and raises a hand in greeting. "Heyo! Kirishima! Where have you been? You weren't present for any of the morning classes," he exclaims as though that's the most pressing issue right now. With a sheepish laugh, Eijiro replies over the din, "I think we have bigger problems right now, dude. What's going on?" Ida seems to switch gears then, instead glancing ahead at the students milling about in panic. "Someone's infiltrated the building, according to a second year I asked. I'm not sure what, exactly, that entails, though. As in whether or not this poses an immediate threat." Eijiro opens his mouth to speak, but a student jostles him and he finds himself thrown against one of the hallway's large glass windows. He remains there for a second as Ida shouts his name in alarm, thinking that it's probably best if he stays where he is for the time being. He'd rather be pressed up against a glass window than jabbed by countless elbows and knocking heads with students. It's during this time pressed against the glass that he looks out and realizes that he can see the front gates of UA. And there, he sees that it's merely a flock of overzealous reporters jostling each other and trying to get into the school while present MIC and a few other faculty members try herding them back off campus. Cementos irks walls of concrete as the reporters are gradually pushed back so that they don't regain their lost ground, and it seems that the situation is slowly becoming more controlled. Ajaru relaxes, glancing over his shoulder at Ida. Ida! Ida glances at Ajaru and listens as he shouts, "It's just reporters. Is there some way you can get everyone to calm down?" The slight tension to the bespectacled student's expression eases, and he seems to be talking to Uraraka. Moments later, he levitates into the air, courtesy of Uraraka's quirk, and goes spinning forward with the aid of his engines until he smacks into the wall directly above the exit sign. One loud announcement from Ida later, the students crowding the halls seem to disperse, the panic fading from where it had taken up a suffocating residence in the building, and the students slowly make their way back to their classrooms. When there's sufficient room to breathe and move without risk again, Ajaru reaches for his phone. The braid at the front of his head falls into his face and he blows it aside as he looks down at the screen. Meme_machine. 1220. Red Riot 420, dude you okay? That was some wild stuff that just happened. PsychoLimbo, yeah I'm good. PsychoLimbo, snuck out of the building to check things out. Red Riot 420, you what? PsychoLimbo, oh shit I see what's left of the gate now. PsychoLimbo, and I think I know who did it. PsychoLimbo, I need to run and do something fast. PsychoLimbo, GTG. Pletmarist is offline. Ajaru runs a hand through his hair in exasperation, but there's not much he can do. Especially not against Izuku's stubborn nature. All he can do for now is not draw attention to the fact that he's got a connection with Gecko and stay in his own lane for the most part. Though, it doesn't help the worry that starts roiling in his stomach. Tsukochi receives an anonymous email from a temporary address shortly after he's notified of the intrusion at UA. It's a lengthy email this time around with no attached files, but he knows exactly who the sender is. After all, who the hell else sends him anonymous emails from temporary addresses? The subject line makes him pause, though. Urgent. He knows Gecko takes his work, and the work of villains, very seriously, but even then, there was always a playful or childish undertone to the messages he receives from Gecko. The subjects of the messages are usually silly or teasing, which is why seeing this one makes him grow a little worried. He opens the message. From XCHJGD565 at xyz.org to branch 675 at .jp. Subject, urgent. You know who it is, so I'll skip the bullshit this time. But you probably know about the intrusion at UA, and that it turned out to be nothing important other than some nosy reporters. I've been doing some poking around and discovered that there's an organized group calling themselves the League of Villains planning something to kill All Might. Their leader is named Shigaraki Tomura, and his quirk is something that lets him decay whatever he touches with all 5 fingers. I've experienced his quirk firsthand and have seen it in action. The aftermath of that quirk looks exactly like what I saw of the gate at UA. So I think they're planning to make a move soon. I recommend upping patrols, especially around UA's campus, and maybe having a few heroes on call near the school. Maybe even place some in the school itself under the guise of guest speakers or something. I don't think this is any small fry gang. This is the real deal. I'll also be on high alert and hanging around the school, if you feel like catching me instead of focusing on this stuff. I really don't care if you guys chase me, but I have people to protect at UA, and if I have to risk my freedom to keep them safe then so be it. Gecko, Akatani Mikumo. Tsukochi reads it over a few times, hoping against hope that it's some sort of prank. But the serious tone and the admission of what could possibly be Gecko's real name only solidifies the detective's fears. He pushes his chair back from his desk and reaches for the phone on the wall behind him. Sangza? What can I do for you, detective? He swallows. I think there's a threat to UA High, and we need to organize countermeasures immediately. Due to me having incredibly high stress levels in regards to the Banha fandom, this fic will be in rest for a fair amount of time. I am not abandoning this fic, I just need some time to write for myself in a way that makes me happy and comfortable. I plan to continue this someday, I don't know when, but I will. For now, I'd like to thank all of you for sticking with me for so long despite the inconsistent update schedules and whatnot, and I'm sorry for leaving you all in suspense. Heater.